He likes Monsters. I'm bringing him some Monster drinks.
Oh, that's a drink?
Yeah. He drinks it like candy.
We'll talk about that later.
So I went and got fitted for hearing aids today.
What did she say? You did?
I'm going.
You got fitted for hearing aids and shit.
She goes,
Huh?
it's time. It's time. Oh, it was wonderful because she put these in and it was like I could hear every single word she was saying through the mask, and I have not been able to.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Never. So I'm taking the big jump. It's all good. I know. I just hearing my voice was so weird. Yeah, I bit the bullet and all, but I'll be here in 2 weeks.
My mom wears a wizard and nephew.
Well, you know, it's time. I went for a hearing test.
Okay, we ready? All right,
Missing a lot of speech.
ladies. Good evening. Welcome to the May 17, 2022 regular meeting for the Township Board, Charter Township of Meridian. I call this meeting to order and ask you to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Lemaster, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Jackson,
Here.
Clerk Guthrie,
Here.
Treasurer DeShane, Trustee Hendrickson, Trustee Sunland, Trustee Wilson, Trustee Wazinski. All present.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is two presentations. The first will be, I believe, by Chief Plaga.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor, board members. I'm happy to introduce our two newest police officers that were sworn in last Monday. They are both the graduates from the Mid-Michigan Police Academy that graduated a week ago Friday. So they right out of the academy and into the fire, and they've begun their field training. Isabella Acker. She comes to us from Sunfield, Michigan. She's a graduate of Western Michigan University, and we're happy to have her. Isabella?
Hello, I just want to say thank you all for giving me this opportunity to work with the township, and I look forward to a long career with Meridian Township.
Good.
Next is Jack Acker. So we have Isabella Acker and Jack Akers. I'm sorry, Jack. We've been doing this. They did the same thing at the police academy too. So Jack is a Hazlet High School graduate. So he comes from us locally, which is great. We always love that when we can find somebody from Meridian Township that comes and works with us. He graduated from Central Michigan University and also the Mid-Michigan Police Academy. Jack?
Yeah, so me as well. I just want to say thank you to everybody for the opportunity. It's super awesome to get to serve the community that I grew up in and the community that gave me so much, so I'm just trying to give a little bit back. So I'm looking forward to a great long career here at Meridian Township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
As you come and meet the board, welcome and thank you for your comments. Officer Acker and Akers. I had just had it backwards. I got it right.
Thank you for joining us. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Plaga. Item 4B is a presentation from Brightline Technologies. Mr.
Gibas. Madam Supervisor, Board of Trustees, it's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. We have two gentlemen who helped us. They've been a partner with Meridian Township Technology for the last 4 or 5 months, and they're going to be a partner in our success as we move through a large number of innovations through the remainder of this year and on into 2023. I have James is over on the side, and Joel is going to be making a very quick presentation. We'll answer any questions that you need tonight.
Is everyone able to see the screen here?
Yeah, everyone can see this.
Okay. Good.
I say confidently.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us tonight. I'll make this short and sweet, and then we'll leave with some questions at the end. If you have any, we'll be able to stand up and answer those questions for you. As you know, Meridian Township engaged with Brightline Technologies to do a review and assessment of your network and IT systems. And Brightline, just to give you a brief overview, we're a managed service provider and we are information technology consultants based out of Brighton. We've been in the industry for over 25 years, building and supporting computer networks for corporations, as well as handling a lot of Department of Defense subcontractor regulatory systems. So we're very familiar with all of your regulations and your processes and procedures. We're also very well versed in hardware, software, everything network related. So my name is Joel Kolodzik. This is James Kabalam. He's one of our head engineers that was involved in this process. We had a number of other engineers on our staff that also helped to gather information. And basically what we were tasked to do was test your system performance, your end user productivity, and your information security status, or basically look at the whole overview of your IT systems. We perform those with remote scans. We also brought in equipment here to scan everything on the network that aggregated all the data and produced a bunch of reports for us to sift through. And we also did personnel interviews with your staff members. And in short, our findings were that your system is very antiquated. You've been hobbling along on some very old and outdated equipment, much of it of which is end of life and also unsupported, which lends itself to slowness, downtimes, and security issues on the network. So this next slide here.
That's the problem.
Okay. We may have that documented. We produced a report showing all of the items that we found were in peril or needed help. We prioritized those items in our report, and this is just a quick summary. Network infrastructure was by far your worst case, your highest priority that needs to be replaced. And then it goes down through some of the other aspects from cybersecurity, obviously very important. Workstations that are outdated should be taken out of service. And we got down into training for your end users, which lends itself to the productivity. And then we have IT consulting, which is for us to come in and help you procure and implement a new IT infrastructure so we can speed things up, make you more secure and more productive. We'll get right on to the costs. You can take a look at the budgets. For 2022, if this was to be implemented this year, your budget is approximately $900,000. The bulk of that is network equipment, switches, firewalls, routers, Wi-Fi equipment. We broke that down also. You'll see there's a $130,000 6-month recurring. That was because we're halfway through the year, so we just did what half of your annual recurring costs would be for this year. And then you can see down through 6 years of what this infrastructure would cost to maintain and keep up. That is with licensing. That's also keeping things up to date with manufacturers' warranties and support. So we have Upfront, about $740,000 plus the recurring, the licensing fees on top of that. And then year over year, you're about $250,000 for the next couple of years. And then in 2025, you would add that annual recurring, plus now you need to renew for another 3 years. So a lot of this, the support that we built into here comes with 3 years of support. So that's why you see that 2025, there's a jump that gets you through year 6. And at the end of year 6, that's basically the life cycle of all of the network equipment. And that would lend itself to another assessment to see if you could continue on using some of that if it's not end of life. And then you would, of course, pick and choose based on your budgets and where we're at that time. So I broke this down again. It's the same level of priority, and you can see the cost for each individual piece down below, the one-time costs and then the recurring maintenance costs. And our estimated timeline, if you were to start today to put in a purchase for all of the equipment, we're looking at about 90 days to procure any hardware right now. The market is very slow. There's a lot of stuff that's difficult to get. So we estimate about 90 days on average for the equipment that we're showing that you need. Implementation for this would be about 3 to 4 months after all of the equipment was procured. And if everything in a perfect world came in those time frames, we would expect about a 7-month turnaround time. And with that, I'll leave you with any questions you might have. We can certainly answer any technical questions or anything of this nature. I can leave this presentation with you as well to review.
Thank you. First, I'll ask Mr. Eves if you have anything to add.
Just how grateful we are to have people who understand networking technology and current coming in and serving as partners with us. There's a lot of whys and where-tos as to how we got to the position that we're in right now, but our focus has really been on finding the best solution moving forward and the shortest path to get there so that our end users are having as good an experience as possible across all of our facilities.
Okay, thank you. Board, we're open to questions. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. I understand that our equipment, much of it is out of date, particularly our switches. But you hear again and again the most vulnerable element of any network are its users. And I'd like to know if you think we've been doing enough heretofore in terms of training our users on proper procedures for handling malware, phishing, and so forth. And also what part of the new proposal we will be doing. Is there any part of the proposal that will include additional training for our 165 users?
Yes, that's a great question. James, I'll let you answer that. We do have this built in.
So during our assessment, we reviewed all of the documented procedures, incident response policies, and things of that sort. A lot of them could use additional development. One thing we've included in our report as something that we highly recommend is a formalized end user training program, something that you can run reports against. Managers can make sure that their employees are completing said training, and if there is an incident, we can direct them to that training and prove that they've completed it. So there is some informal training happening now. There's a process that's followed as far as what happens when a cybersecurity event occurs. But part of our recommendation is strengthening those written policies and procedures. The second is implementing a formal training program for both onboarding and ongoing education.
Great. Thank you.
The other thing I should include, they included in these costs a significant training program called Quick Help, which we rolled out during the assessment and used as part of our evaluation. That's included, which has a very significant end user training component to it.
Yep. Yep. So those numbers included all of that formalized training.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So you laid out a number of annual recurring costs, and I understand what that entails generally. My question is, I guess for Director Geebies, what is our current annual recurring cost, and is this all new recurring annual, or is this on top of what we already do?
So that's a complicated question that goes back to kind of how we ended up in this situation. Cisco's made some significant changes to their licensing over the years since we did our initial voice over IP system back in the mid-2000s, and the licensing has changed. We have a very low cost of ownership right now because we did not buy into their new licensing scheme. This will put us into the new licensing scheme, and there will be costs that we are offsetting through other methods. So it's not that the cost is zero. However, as we move forward, there's going to be significantly higher maintenance costs than we've had up until now, which has been on the order of $20,000 to $30,000 a year. That's going to at least double for the support, and maybe more depending on the levels of licensure that we go for. Cisco's DNA, their top level product, we could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars if we go all the way to the top. You guys just have gone through something at Ingham County very similar to that, and they're paying significantly more than we are. We will not go that high, but there will be higher costs.
Thank you. And my second question relates to the new server infrastructure and the back end stuff. Specifically, in my experience, it's not been the best practice to replace all equipment right at once, because you can have a phased approach at that point when new infrastructure is needed down the road. It's just a spreading out of the cost of replacing that. So you're replacing something every few years instead of everything all at once. And they also preclude the possibility, as servers reach end of life, of them all failing at the same time as they're at the end of life. Has there been any consideration given to spreading that infrastructure purchase across several years?
Absolutely, and there are pros and cons to either of those approaches. One of the disadvantages of doing a staggered replacement of, say, our ESXi hosts, those are the servers that all of our guest operating systems operate on. If they're running at different levels of operating systems or they're running different core processors, sometimes that can complicate how we move from one resource to the other. That will be evaluated as we go forward. However, our current ESXi hosts are not really covered in this report because they're relatively new. And we expect that as part of this, we're going to start to be moving many of our resources will no longer even be local. We'll be using hosted data centers out on the internet for a lot of the things that we're going to. And so naturally, we're going to come to a place where we're going to have to do a much smaller replacement next time around. Maybe one of our 3 ESXi hosts, maybe 2, maybe we switch to some other hybrid approach. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That decision's probably 4 to 5 years down the road right now.
Okay. And then lastly, I don't know if you can go back to the slide, but the annual spend, that would be helpful for me here. So then, as a follow-up to that, would we expect something in the order of another $730,000 bill come 2028?
That's a loaded question.
There's a lot of, and if you guys don't mind, that goes back really to the licensing, the level of licensing that we're going to do with our vendor. If we choose Cisco and we put stuff under what's called a SmartNet maintenance contract, there's some things that we can do that will automatically replace and turn our per port cost or our per user cost into more modular thing where that would cap the cost. But those are decisions that we will have. There will be a point someplace down the road where we have to replace our switches. There's no question about that. The first evaluation of that will come in about half a decade from now. And then we'll talk about where we're currently licensed at that point, and we'll have to take a look at what the costs are going forward. That's a difficult question to answer. Is that fair, guys?
Yeah, that's very fair. And also at the rate that technology is changing, we've had next generation firewalls that 4 or 5 years ago were the latest and greatest and the best protection. And now you have artificial intelligence replacing a lot of those engines. And so now those systems don't work on the old hardware and so on and so forth. So it's just cyclical. So it's really hard to gauge down that far, what will still be supported, what will be end of life, what won't. I imagine you could be able to piecemeal it better once you get up to date, because this stuff that you have now is extremely old. from that point, I would expect that some stuff would be replaced, some stuff could be held on to for a few more years, where you could start to step in maybe a little more of a phased approach, what you're looking for.
Yep, that does tie back into your earlier question of why replace everything all at once, is to get it on a consistent platform for a single pane of management. If you start to fold in different components and, you know, half the facilities have the old equipment, the old system, now the IT team has to go to two places to try to figure out or troubleshoot where an issue might occur. Whereas if you have centralized management, everything on a consistent platform, you can identify issues much quicker. Right here is forecasted 6 years. Switches in particular are often in service for a bit longer than that. Your current switches have been in service for almost 2 decades. So their management system is very limited. The newer equipment has much more advanced, Joel said, a lot of AI as far as packet prioritization and things like that to make sure things keep moving. In 6 years, Cisco may be on that same platform, and then you can start to fold in new equipment with that same system in place. So hard to tell where 6 years where we'll be, but the trend is towards more subscription costs over upfront costs. That's why the annual cost there is, a lot of that is monthly costs annualized. It includes things like your internet service, upgrading the bandwidth at each of the facilities. It includes off-site backups and cloud backups in a secure data center, which isn't occurring currently. So a lot of that cost is hosting and services that are subscription-based and also usage-based.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions or comments? Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
And you noted that report will be available through Mr. Geeves?
Yes, you should have all the reports, and I will pass this slide deck over to him as well.
We've got 3 different reports, one that's extremely detailed and very technical, one that is simply cost estimates, and then this report is the most distilled version of those.
Okay, thank you.
You can keep that.
We'll move on now to citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. As you know, there are 2 opportunities for public comment, one at the beginning of the meeting and the other near the end. Individuals who wish to address the board must complete a green form, pass it to the board secretary, and then individuals who have completed the form will be called upon to speak to the topics indicated. Citizens are required to limit their comments to 3 minutes. A timekeeper will communicate when the person addressing the board has come to the end of their 3-minute allotment. The board highly values public comment and input. However, the board meeting format is designed to facilitate the evening's agenda and therefore restricts board members from engaging in conversation with speakers or immediately responding to questions. In order to foster the orderly conduct of the board's meeting on behalf of the community, please refrain from rude or discourteous behavior. Address all comments to the board, not to individual board members or to others in attendance. And finally, the meeting is a meeting of the board of the Charter Township, held in public for the purpose of conducting the business of the township. It is not a meeting of the public, and please limit your comments to the issues on the agenda to the greatest extent possible. I have no green cards. Is there anyone in the audience who is interested in speaking to the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 6. Board member reports. Township manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. A few things this evening, and if you don't mind, at the end of the conclusion of my report, if it would be okay, I'd like to have Director Maisner come up because she has something on the consent agenda which probably won't be discussed in detail, and that involves Celebrate Meridian, and maybe she could take a couple minutes and update the community on the Celebrate Meridian. A few things. Last week, Chief Plaga, Director Maisner, and Treasurer DeShane and myself presented to the Indian Hills neighborhood Trustee Wilson was also in attendance because she happens to be on the board of the Indian Hills neighborhood. And we spoke about a number of issues going on in the community. There was a large crowd, probably 50 residents here. The township staff was well received, well respected by the group. We talked about obviously traffic issues and cut-throughs and speeding and all of those issues. But I just want to thank President George Cass and the board and the neighborhood. I thought it was a very respectful evening on some difficult topics. Speaking of that, we are continuing. Manager Opsummer is working on the local road program and doing it the right way. Again, I want to mention that in the past couple years, we've come up with a list of roads, we've informed the public, and then we've taken bids. And this year, that's caught up with us because the bids are 18 to 21% higher than what we expected. But we've already gone forward with the list. Right now, the list is being developed. In fact, I think we have a list, and that will be turned over to the engineers. They'll work on it this summer, and this fall we'll have the number and to figure out what we can do, and then we'll bid it out. We'll have the number, and we know whether that fits or not before we unveil the list of streets. The solar project will be marching forward soon over at the Public Safety Building. I mentioned at a meeting or two ago that we were planning a Juneteenth event this year for the first time. That's now been scheduled. It'll happen on Monday, June 20th at noon. The building, the township offices will close, and the Honorable Wanda Stokes, Judge Stokes, has agreed, accepted our invitation to come and talk about her career from where it started and through the AG's office. This is kind of a memorable one for us, too, because she and Supervisor Steicha were very close at the AG's office. In fact, if you recall, back a couple years ago when this board was put in place, Judge Stokes handled the ceremony and the swearing-in ceremony. So it'd be nice to have her back, and we appreciate her accepting our offer. Our work on our audit continues. We're still hopeful, even though we've had some peaks and valleys with the process here in the last couple of months. I appreciate the work that's gone on with the staff that's been here. I know the Treasurer DeShane's office has been very involved in that, but I wanted to reintroduce tonight to you Miss Amanda Garber, who's here this evening. Miss Garber, she has joined us as our new finance director. We've gone 6 years without having a CPA in that office, and it's nice to have, before that we had Gretchen Gomolka, who is now with the city of Brighton. She left us 6 years ago, and she also is a CPA. And it adds a lot of institutional knowledge into the process of running the finance. I mean, you're really running a $50 million business. So we appreciate having Amanda. This is her second day with us, and she's still here. So that's a good sign. I wanted to mention a trip that we took just today. I want to thank Supervisor Jackson, Treasurer DeShane, and Trustee Sunland. We can only take 3, so we don't have a quorum. And then a number, Director Schmidt and Director Clark and I, the 6 of us went up to Mount Pleasant today to look at a project. I won't go into details too much because under 13D, you'll be discussing this. But we did take a site visit up to the Broadway Lofts project in Mount Pleasant. Had a wonderful tour there from Stacy and Bill, and more details to follow on that, but it was a very useful 4 or 5 hours for us today. And we're also in contract negotiations with 4 of our bargaining units. We've had our first session with Public Works, supervisory, non-supervisory, and administrative professionals, and those will continue on for the next few months, I'm sure. And that concludes my report, and I'd ask Director Maisner if you could give us the overview of Celebrate Meridian. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor, Township Board. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you a little bit about Celebrate Meridian, and thank you, Manager Walls, for inviting me to speak tonight. On the consent agenda is the outdoor gathering permit. We're very excited to have Celebrate Meridian come back, and a little different this year because typically we close down Central Park Drive and we have the food trucks there. Unable to do that this year with all the road construction. Central Park Drive is a detour route, so that will remain open. We do plan on having children's activities here on site on the soccer field with inflatables and arts and crafts and children's games and activities. There'll be some music here, a few food trucks on this side. And then very excited to be activating the marketplace on the green site and bringing that into the mix for this event. And using the performance stage, we do have the farmers market will take place from 8 until 2. And then starting at 4 o'clock will be the beer and wine tent. We'll start bands on the stage at 4. They will go until 10, 10:15, and about 10:20, the fireworks display will occur. And but there will be food trucks over at the marketplace as well. Like I said, I've met with police, fire. We've had some organizational meetings, communications, and we're in good shape moving forward. On the township website, we do have a volunteer sign-up opportunity for the community. We're looking for like 125, 130 volunteers to help us throughout the day in like a 2-hour shifts, so it's not anything that's too taxing. And then also, I believe there's been something submitted to the boards and commissions and staff for volunteers for the beer and wine tent, which will take place from, we'll bring people on around 3:30. It officially opens at 4 o'clock, and it will go until just after the fireworks at 11:30. So that is the event. We're just so excited to be back. We've got a lot of great sponsors back to help us, and look forward to seeing our community out to celebrate Meridian this year. The date is Saturday, June 25th, and it will run from 4 until 11. But with the farmers market, we do have entertainment on the stage with the Okemos School of Music. So we'll have students and instructors providing music during the farmers market. And then also we have a ballet performance from 3:30 until 4 from Happen Dance. So bringing all sorts of entertainment here to the stage, and look forward to having the community out and celebrating our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Next item is board member reports of activities and announcements. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Just 4 quick things I want to bring to note. EDC meeting here on May 4th, led by Director Clark. I attended the swearing in of our new police officers that were here earlier on May 9th. May 12th was the 50th anniversary of the CATA, Capital Area Transit Authority. They had a very nice ceremony. Other board members joined me at that as well. And then on May 13th was the monthly meeting with the Meridian Area Business Association, MABA, which is doing very well. That's my report. Thank you.
All right. No others? And we will move to approve our agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Trustee Sundlin, supported by Trustee Wilson. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes. Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Opposed, no. Then the agenda is approved. We now come to the consent agenda. We already had a taste of that from Director Meisner, because in item 9D is a permit for outdoor gathering to celebrate Meridian. Also, there are 3 other items aside from communications and minutes and bills. The other 2 items have to do with waiving a section, a subsection of our ordinance to better facilitate Grand River Avenue construction. Item F is a request from Mr. Walsh for an adjustment in the township millage rate. And item G is establishing polling places for the August primaries. And so consider, if you will, if there's anything in that consent agenda you would like more discussion of, you may propose taking them out and having that. Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'll point out that we did have a couple of adjustments that were made to the minutes earlier today, as well as a substitute for 9G that came in that's available on the township website. And I will move the consent agenda as amended and substituted.
Support.
Moved and supported appropriately that the consent agenda, further discussion? Mr. DeShane.
Yes, a question for the clerk on these new polling places. First of all, I think it'd be worthwhile to explain to the public again why we're moving out of the schools. And secondly, in terms of the 4, I think they're all churches where we have 2 precincts combined, are you at all concerned about maybe having too many people arriving there? Do you believe there's enough public space to accommodate 2 different precincts at New Hope Church, St. Luke's Church, Faith Lutheran? I believe those are the 3 churches that, as well as the 242 Community Church. Those are my 2 questions.
Thank you, Treasurer Justine. Appreciate it. I don't know how much you want me to review, so I'll just kind of go back. Pardon me if I talk a little too much and just cut me off. Due to the statewide redistricting, county reapportionment, and our local election commission met and we did precinct boundary changes. This created 3 more precincts in the township, and our goal, the local election commission goal, was to have precincts that did not have split ballots that had 2 different styles of ballots for any precinct, and so that created a few more precincts. And each precinct in the township needs to have a polling location. So this created basically, a task for our department to look for new polling locations on top of the school districts wanting to have polling locations moved out of the schools due to the safety of the children. We have extensively reviewed the locations of the schools with the school district, with the superintendents, with the principals. We met with them during the school day so that we could see how, where people enter the school building, how it actually crosses where children are getting to school, getting dropped off on the bus, leaving the school at the end of the day, how the school buses intersect with where vehicles are coming in and out of. And as you know, a ton of parents drop their kids off now, and there have been a lot of changes to parking lots at all of our schools, as long as they can be made for drop-off locations. And so for those reasons, and given heightened security issues across the country, with people wanting to have a right to carry no matter where it is, even if it's in a school, we decided and met with them to get the polling locations out of the schools as much as possible. In regards to the specific locations that you questioned, we did visit each of those locations to determine that we are able to set up more than 1 precinct at those locations. Some of those locations we can have more than indicated in, so like 242, we could have 4 precincts in there if we needed to. One of the things that when we put 2 precincts in 1 location that allows us to do is to share a VAT machine. And so you don't have to have a VAT machine for every single precinct. If you share a polling location, you can have 1 precinct. You can have 1 VAT machine for those precincts. And so that reduces the cost of us having to buy 3 additional VAT machines for 3 new precincts. So it saves a significant amount of money. Zach can probably correct me, but I think it's about $35,000 that it saves us. Something around there.
$30,000, yeah.
Around $30,000 it saves us by putting more than one precinct in there. So yes, there's plenty of space. We did assess it. Deputy Clerk Robin Faust and myself went to each location to assess the parking, to assess ADA compliance, and to assess the space needs inside.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
In addition, if I could real quick, we have around, I just have this number, we have around 33,000 registered voters, and 16,000 of them voted absentee.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'll just add to that simply by saying that my day job has given me some insight into the trends in voting as well since Proposal 3 of 2018. And whereas before you might see, 25% of the population vote by absentee ballot, now the ratio is flipped. So you're seeing almost 3/4 of the population in some recent elections voting by absentee ballot. And so the consolidation of precincts into a single location becomes much easier when you've got far fewer people planning on voting in person. And it's my hope that, voting, part of my day job and here as well, it's my hope that voting is easy to do both in person and via absentee ballot. And I expect that the habits that people form by voting absentee throughout the pandemic will continue. And so I'm excited to see that we're able to use fewer polling locations in the map as shown here. And I'll also point out to the clerk's point about, the schools no longer allowing voters into their buildings for fear of safety, that there is no better argument for Election Day as a federal holiday than to provide access to some of those locations. Because the last thing that, we're sort of forced into either municipal buildings or places of worship by the school districts asking us not to come back. And the last thing I would want is for any voter to feel uncomfortable entering a place of worship where they may not agree with, that place of worship's denomination. And they should be able to vote in a place where they feel comfortable. I'm excited about this. I think this is a good set of polling locations that have been created here. I think that there's still work to be done on our election statute. And I think there's some possibilities in the future for that. But there's good work done here.
I'll call on myself. I have a question for Clerk Guthrie. I have noticed in the newspaper and the television news that Meridian Township's plans to send new voting credentials to all of its residents because of all of this activity have been broadcast. And so would you like to speak further to that point?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Supervisor. It is by law that we have to send new voter IDs to everyone in the township. There's probably only about 3,000 people in the state of Michigan who won't receive a new voter ID because of state-wide redistricting. And so currently, the Bureau of Elections is trying to complete their street indexing updates on the back end of the qualified voter database file. And so the county is waiting for them to complete their updates. And so we're waiting for that. And as soon as all of that is done, we can send out voter IDs. So I'm kind of glad there's a little backup because we can have all of the new polling locations on the voter IDs, and we can go put that into the system if the board approves that tonight. And we can do that work this week. And then as soon as the BOE is ready, we can send those voter IDs out.
Okay.
And there is, and it is in the packet, there's a little thing on the side that says, hey, this is new information, all of this is basically new, so please pay attention.
A graphic of that,
yep.
Yes.
Yep, thank you for asking that question, thank you.
All right, the motion is to approve the consent agenda. If there are, I have a motion, I had a second, right? Okay, we need a roll call vote to approve the consent agenda.
Supervisor Jackson,
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson,
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin,
Yes.
Trustee Wilson,
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Item 10, questions for attorneys. We have no questions that we know of at this point. Item 11 is hearings. We have none planned. We move to item 12A through E, which are our action items. The first item, 12A, relates to the Village of Okemos Meridian Redevelopment Fund requests, and this will be presented by Director Clark.
Good evening. Last time we were in front of you, we were bringing forward the introduction for discussion of the Village of Okemos LLC's request for the use of the redevelopment fund, the Meridian Redevelopment Fund, for public street infrastructure improvements on the 4 streets that surround the 2-block development in downtown. We held a public hearing as the Act requires. It is a requirement of the Public Act 338 that established the Economic Development Corporation. That body gave an advisement to the Township Board for the $1.25 million in support of the public funding. Tonight, the objective, hopefully for the board, is to adopt the attached resolution, and is a part of the packet, that reveals the steps that brought us here for the redevelopment fund and would establish a development agreement created by our attorneys and staff that set out the terms of the use of those funds and the issuance of those funds. And that is our discussion item tonight.
All right. Would anyone like to offer a motion? Trustee Sundlin.
Okay, so move to adopt the attached resolution authorizing township staff to create a development agreement with the Village of Okemos LLC for the use of the Meridian Redevelopment Fund and set the terms of the funding request with the developer not to exceed $1,250,000.
Is there support? Support. Support by Trustee Wilson. Trustee Sundlin.
And yeah, as Amber was discussing, this is like the fund request number 2, so we're going through the process and just making sure we're getting it taken care of.
Trustee Wilson.
Purpose of the use of these funds, the $1.25 million, is for public infrastructure, specifically to redevelop the streets around this complex that is proposed. So this is money that we would have to spend at some point, and it makes sense to do this as part of the overhaul of this particular area. But no matter whether the project goes forward or not, this is work that needs to be done. So that's why I am in support of it.
Other comments? Treasurer DeShane.
Just to clarify, if the project does not move forward, the money would not be spent, correct? The roads will not be fixed unless the development agreement is signed and the developer begins construction. And this is money that will be spent as the project has been developed. Is that correct?
Correct. The plan is to create a development agreement that would emphasize that we would need to see, basically creating a construction draw contract. So we would need to see that work was approved with a cost estimate provided by a contractor, and the sum of that money at the time would be spent. So it is not my intention to work with the Treasury Department and issue a check for $1.25 million, that it would be related specifically to construction activity for those improvements.
Mr. Walsh.
Good questions, and another way to look at this is these roads are in horrible condition. So the residents of the township, through the road tax that we have, will end up in the next couple of years paying for this. So these roads are going to be improved in the next 2 or 3 years. It's a question of how. We can just not do anything and let the local road tax pay it, or we could go forward with this proposal and pay for those improvements with the caveat that we will be paid back with the increased taxes from the new development. So it's either let the residents, Plan A, let the residents all pay for it, or Plan B, front the money and then get reimbursed, and so the new taxes, the development pay for it. That's kind of the scenario we're looking at. The $1.2 million will be reimbursed from the new taxes on the development. Will go back in the seed money to the redevelopment fund.
Anyone else? So this is a motion to approve?
To adopt the attached resolution.
To adopt the, right, I'm sorry. To adopt the resolution. We need a roll call vote. Mr. Lemaster?
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Clark. Item 12B, ordinance number 2022-05, non-residential fence height, final adoption. Director Schmidt.
Madam Supervisor, at the direction of the board, we did publish a notice of intent to adopt this ordinance prior to this meeting. There have been no changes made, nor have there been any major concerns raised throughout the process. At this time, staff would recommend that the ordinances be adopted in the format that's been presented.
Trustee DeShane.
I move to adopt the resolution approving for final adoption zoning amendment 2022-05 to amend section 86506 of the Charter Township of Meridian zoning code, an ordinance to update the maximum height of fences, walls, and screens in non-residential zoning districts.
Support.
Moved by Treasurer DeShane, supported by Trustee Wazinski. Further comments?
With Dr. Schmidt there, this came from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm recently back on that board, but if you want to give the board an update on why this came from the ZBA.
Yeah, briefly, this came out of a combination of me looking into a couple projects and the ZBA struggling with a request that they received to replace an existing fence that was slightly taller than permitted under ordinance. And so we're trying to find a happy medium to provide a little bit of flexibility in non-residential circumstances where additional screening or fence height is needed to protect outdoor storage, maintain a yard, or screen a piece of equipment.
Thank you.
Trustee Wazinski.
I would only add to not only the ZBA, but also as a board, when we have developments, this is something we generally ask for in certain cases, a Sparrow facility, so that we are protecting, adjacent homeowners and such as well. So that's why I support.
No further discussion? Mr. Lemaster?
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt now will talk to us about final adoption of item 12C, an ordinance relating to deck porch encroachments into yards.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. This, as directed by the Township Board, we have published a notice of intent to adopt this ordinance, which would allow for flexibilities for homeowners to have more than one deck or porch in a yard, as long as it still meets the setback and lot coverage requirements in the ordinance. This is just a quirky little item that pops up every once in a while, and we're usually able to talk our way around it, but while we were going through these relatively easy changes at the beginning of my tenure here, we decided to go ahead and make this change to make it very straightforward in the future. There have been no major concerns brought up as a result of this ordinance, and staff would recommend approval at this time.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to adopt the resolution approving for final adoption zoning amendment 2022-06 to amend section 86564 of the Charter Township of Meridian zoning code, an ordinance to update the permitted yard encroachments in residential zoning districts.
Support.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Comments?
It's deck and patio season here in Meridian Township. And this is something, as Director Schmidt pointed out, that we have gotten around in other creative ways, but it doesn't make sense to continue to make exceptions and skirt around our ordinance. We might as well update it so that it's clear to all when they move here that such things are allowable. So I'm excited about this change, and I'm looking forward to supporting it.
Trustee Wilson.
Support it because I believe it's a common sense approach to the way people are developing their properties today.
And using their properties.
And using their
Yes,
properties.
Yes. Other comments? Then, Mr. Lemaster.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Then item 12D from Mr. Schmidt involves the triple R district deletion.
Madam Supervisor, as directed by the Township Board, we did publish notice of this intent to adopt this ordinance prior to this meeting. This is an item that will implement one of the direct goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, in that we are consolidating the number of single-family districts we have in the community. To reiterate, the triple R district is not used anywhere in the current zoning map, so no properties actually need to be rezoned as a result of this change, nor is there any specific use in the triple R district that is not found elsewhere, or provides some sort of flexibility that is not found elsewhere. So this is simply an era of an item that is from an era bygone and is no longer needed in our ordinance. And so for purposes of clarity and moving forward, we would recommend adopting this ordinance as presented.
Thank you. Trustee, Treasurer DeShane.
A question for you. There are quite a few RR parcels. How is RR different from triple R?
RR functions as our most rural district, slightly larger lot size, slightly larger setbacks, slightly larger lot width requirements. The RR also, and this is something you'll see from us later, acts as the holding tank for a lot of regulations that really apply for elsewhere. And so at some point we're going to start pulling those out so people know they apply elsewhere. But the RR district is really one of the districts that won't go anywhere. That functions as the area, the zoning for the area outside of the urban service boundary. So the RR is pretty well embedded into our DNA here, and we will simply be proposing some changes to make it more user-friendly going forward.
Trustee Wilson.
Move to adopt the resolution approving for final adoption zoning amendment 2022-07 to amend the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian at multiple sections to delete the triple RRR, one family rural residential low density district from the zoning ordinance.
Support. Supported by Trustee Wazinski. Any comments, additional comments?
It's been well explained by Director Schmidt that this is not used. No one is in the zoning, so it makes sense to remove it from the zoning code.
All right.
I'd just like to thank Director Schmidt for recognizing this. I know we had conversations a long time ago. He noticed it right up front. So just making it much more efficient for the township. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Lemaster.
Trustee Sundlin?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Item 12E has to do with an appointment to the Brownfield Development Authority for a term ending 12/31/23. I will offer some explanation for what's going on. Mr. David Primo is the representative from the Planning Commission that also served on the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. With the departure of Commissioner Hendrickson to the Township Board, there is now an opening for a Planning Commission representative to serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Primo is interested in filling that seat, leaving a vacancy at the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. And so with Mr. Trezise is interested in filling that vacancy, I'm sorry. And the Planning Commission has made a recommendation to the Township Board to make that appointment. And so I offer this motion to appoint Peter Trezise to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for a term ending 12/31/23.
Support.
Moved and supported by Mr. DeShane. I don't think there's much more I would add, except that we thank both gentlemen for their service and their willingness to extend their service and to further contribute to the township. Are there other comments, questions, or input? Then we can, all in favor of the motion to appoint Peter Trezise, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. And congratulate Mr. Trezise on his new job in Meridian Township. We will now move to item 13A. Mr. Schmidt
I'm
will
back.
talk to us about a special use permit.
So, the request in front of you this evening is for the property at 3830 and 3836 Okemos Road. Currently at 3830 is the existing Bickford house facility, 24,561 square foot building that you can see at the bottom of the drawing here, roughly square in shape. This was approved previously by the Planning Commission as it's a non-residential use in a residential district. It is currently under 25,000 square feet, so this request was not in front of the board previously. They are proposing an expansion on the northern part of the building, and I'll zoom in here so it's a little more visible. So this is the proposed expansion. It is a entirely self-contained addition to the building for a memory care unit. There's currently a small memory care unit in the existing building. This would expand that residential offering on the property. These types of units are entirely self-contained because you want to make sure that people are safely inside the building. And so there's limited access. There's a courtyard where they would be able to access to go outside, but they would not be able to get outside very easily. This obviously necessitates two things. One, they are purchasing the property to the north, and that is being incorporated into this project. That is 3836 Okemos Road. Secondly, obviously, we'll have some reconfiguration on the property, some additional parking, although not much is required. And then this area to the north, you see that's vacant. On this drawing, this is actually where stormwater management and landscape screening will go. Obviously subject to the approval eventually of the Ingham County Drain Commissioner's office. They are proposing to leave the barn located at the northeast corner of the site for facility use. So the request in front of you this evening is the building is now greater than 25,000 square feet, and therefore the Township Board is required to take action on this. The Planning Commission did review this, held a public hearing at their April 25th meeting. There were some questions about the overall development, which we followed up on and the applicant did follow up on. And ultimately at the Planning Commission's May 7th meeting, they did recommend unanimous approval of the underlying special use permit and did recommend unanimous approval for their recommendation to the board on the building greater than 25,000 square feet. Be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here this evening as well. But from staff's perspective, this certainly is a good addition to the site on providing additional housing opportunity for people with very specific needs in the township.
Okay. Mr. DeShane.
This is a non-residential use in the residential zone. This is attached or adjacent to the Briarwood neighborhood. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does your department get any complaints from the residents surrounding this current facility about the noise or other impediments to them enjoying their homes there on New Salem Avenue and surrounding areas?
I've received no complaints. We have, during the review of the project, a couple things have come up. There's a dead tree. There might be some erosion in a couple spots, which we will address through this construction process, but nothing on an ongoing basis with respect to this facility.
I remember when this was first being discussed, Supervisor Steichen said that at first, when it was proposed, the neighborhood was very much concerned about it, but over the years, their concerns were completely allayed by the well-run facility that it is. So, and I would just close by saying I think this is an essential community asset. Memory care is a major issue for many families, many individuals in our township, and I'm glad to have more capacity for this type of care being brought in here into the township, particularly in this case adjacent to a neighborhood, which would make it easy for them to stay connected to family members, perhaps. Thank you.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you very much, Madam Supervisor. I am supportive of this proposal. I do have a question, as this is located for the applicant, as this is located on a rather busy street, and it sounds as though you're adding or expanding memory care significantly, which is to say, can you walk me through what the security will be like to prevent, say, someone who's in this facility from wandering out onto Okemos Road?
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Eby from Bickford to come up and speak to that if he doesn't mind. Please.
Richard Eby, 13112 West 126th Street, Overland Park, Kansas. Thank you for this opportunity to present our proposal before you. We've been in operation now for 14 years, and we think we've done a service to the community, and we've enjoyed being a part of this community. In deference to your question, specifically was what again?
So I was curious, since you're increasing the number of memory care residents, there is sometimes an issue with them,
yes,
making their way out of the facility.
Yes.
And this is a very busy road.
Yes.
And so I'm just interested to find out about the security.
Okay. Yes, it is a very secured building. Residents are not allowed to leave the building. The residents within the building will have either a watch or a pendant, something that will, as they approach a door, if that door is open, it will automatically alarm the staff that someone is near an open door and prevent them from exiting. So it's almost like a GPS system that we know where the residents are at all times. And yes, it's a big issue. You're correct in being concerned about that issue, because we for sure don't want our residents out wandering. So, and that's one of the reasons we provide an interior courtyard. I think there are only 2 exit doors, and of course those are monitored. Family members may be given a fob so that when they want to enter exit they may, but they will need to come through the front door to check in. But if a door, for example, I mentioned the fact that they have on themselves a security pendant. If, for example, a family member is leaving and someone else tailgates them out, tries to tailgate them, that will alarm. So, does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Schmidt? Trustee Wilson.
Yes, Director. I read in the notes on this that there's going to be some tree removal as part of taking a hill down on the north end of the property. And it stated that Mr. Petru replied they were willing to work with staff on that matter. Will you be doing that will you be asking for that kind of replacement?
Absolutely. We'll expect, and as part of their letter to the Planning Commission indicated that we'll essentially be extending that double row of evergreens that currently exists as a barrier to Briarwood. We'll extend that to the north. Just by way of background, this is the level of grading that they're going to have to get into. And I know this looks like a lot of lines, but what that says is there's a lot of digging that's going to have to go on for this project to continue. I mean, obviously, given what we all know about how big that hill is. But just by way of background, you know, all these trees on the northern side of the property are being replaced, and then continuing that double row down to get to sort of the existing row of trees. So they are doing a good job of getting back in there and replacing trees and leaving the ones to the extent they can. Obviously, any tree they take down, they're not required to replace, but certainly due to screening requirements, they're going to have to put a bunch in, and due to requirements from the Drain Commissioner's office, they're going to have to put a bunch in. So it's well within their wheelhouse to preserve as many as possible.
I had one more question.
Yes, please.
And that's related to construction noise. Is there going to be a way to protect that neighborhood, the Briarwood neighborhood there, from as little inconvenience as possible?
Certainly, it is very close, but they will be held to the same standard that any other construction project is adjacent to any other residential neighborhood in the township. We don't expect that there'll be Sunday construction. We don't expect that they'll be working after the hours in the ordinance or before the hours in the ordinance. And when we get a complaint, we follow up on it, as we had happen once with the Sparrow project. So we will enforce the ordinance like we do with everyone else. There's nothing special that we can do here, unfortunately. It is one of those boundaries that we have, and we just have to do our best to follow the rules while we are under construction.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? So at this point, I'm presuming an agreement among the board that we would be inclined to support the resolution for approval of the special use permit, and we then expect to see this again at our next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 13B is the American Rescue Plan funding, first round appropriations, and Mr. Walsh will bring us up to date on that item.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. As you know, this is the board's fourth discussion on the American Rescue Plan funding. The township is in receipt of $2.270,000, half of our allotment from the American Rescue Plan funding. The additional 2.27 will come in October of this year. So the discussion tonight is just focused on the first round. After a lot of discussions and looking at different projects, we had suggested at the last meeting, we had a good discussion on that, in allocating the $1.3 million to local roads and the $970,000 or thereof to the IT project. And as you can hear tonight, we're really behind. I don't know if it's the 8th ball or the 15th ball, really, on the IT situation here at the township. We have situations right now where at the service center, Director Maisner waits for 10 or 15 minutes for her circle to stop circling, so she can actually access, and her staff as well. It's become a big issue. We're trying to tackle the entire project all at once this year, so that's why the $970,000 is suggested. I can tell you also, Manager Opsimer will tell you that the local road project, the bids are in, and we're probably looking at anywhere. We're not sure at this point because we don't have everything allocated at this time, but we could need out of that $1.3 million. Remember, we gave out this big list of roads and then we did the bids. Probably the wrong order. So we have a need of about anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 of that 1.3 this year, so we don't have to cut any of the roads. It's a robust list for 2022. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're requesting. I mentioned this to Supervisor Jackson after our last discussion, and she indicated she sets the agenda, I don't, and she suggested this come back on for discussion one more time before it moves to action, especially because we didn't have a full board at our last meeting. So that's where we're at with the American Rescue Plan, the first round of funding. That's where we're recommending, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have tonight. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Trustee Wilson.
I was here in Town Hall room today for Rotary, and we had a guest speaker from the Hospice of Lansing, and we watched her speak and watched the monitors flash on and off and on and off. And this is just anecdotally, but we can see the need for infrastructure for our meetings to be conducted without interruption, and the improvement of the firewall, because we're also seeing some evidence of that. So I am 100% in favor of the infrastructure improvements and obviously about the road improvements. This is critical infrastructure that needs to stay on pace. Thank you.
Okay. Treasurer DeShane.
2 years ago, when we moved our treasury, utility billing, and planning departments out into the kiosk, we really stretched our IT resources to the max. And we had the same situation that the Parks has, where the internet would be available, then it would be off, available and off. It's really hard to get work done when you only have the internet half the time. So what you're experiencing up there, we experienced here, and it's just intolerable. Well, it's tolerable if you want people to do half the work that they want to do, because they're offline half the time. So I agree, this IT infrastructure investment's really important. In roads, I mean, there's nothing this board has done the past 6 years that I think has stronger public support than put the road millage before the voters. They approved it, and first 2 years were very successful. We want this third year to be successful as well. So I fully support this use of the half of the first round, the half of the American Rescue Plan first round appropriation.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. You can count me as one of the more skeptical voices on the board, I think, with regard to the IT infrastructure, just simply because I was uncertain about the need for all of the upfront investment. I thank Director Geebies and the folks from Brightline for coming tonight to make it as apparent as they did for why it is we need to make that investment quickly. My only questions really relate to, we had discussed using some of the rescue plan funding as match money for, trailways and parks and whatnot. And I wanted to make sure that by allocating this first tranche completely to roads and IT, that we're not missing some kind of a timing deadline with regard to the matching funds. There's a certain window, I'm sure, in which we would hope to have those projects begin. Has that been considered, and are we certain that we're not missing any deadlines in that capacity? For a project timeline perspective.
Sure. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're not going to miss any deadlines, because during the year there's different times to apply for different things. I think April 1st is a popular date to apply for the DNR and some other grants. But over the last few years, we've done extensive work with our pathways. We've built the Okemos Road bridge down by the Camelback, and then we built the Okemos Boardwalk north of town, and now we're doing phase 1, 2, and 3 of the MSU to Lake Lansing pathway. So I guess to answer your question, I wouldn't sit here and mislead you that we wouldn't miss some deadlines or some grants if this money were to be available. It's just, I guess, a philosophical view on whether we think it should go here or here. I feel strongly that it should go here where we are tonight. But yes, if we had that $1.3 million available, we would be able to apply for some different grants. In my mind, we've done a lot of work in that area, and I think we should personally focus on the IT and the roads. But yes, there would be other grants that would be available, and we could use that $1.3 million towards other things.
I guess my point is, if we allocate $1.3 million of the first tranche of the ARP money to roads, it's not going to be spent until next year, right? So I presume, with the exception of making up the cost of the 2022 program, which would be spent this year. So I guess that take off the $500,000 that you think we'll spend covering those costs. There's $800,000. Might that be better allocated toward programs that we could find a match for now? And when we get the second tranche in October, we can say, okay, now we can spend the rest on the next set of funding for roads, which is coming in 2023, and which will be expended later. I'm just trying to spend the money smartly from a timing perspective.
And we are too, yeah, obviously. Yeah, I mean, it's all a philosophy, because if I was taking that philosophy, I'd be saying, well, we've got extra money available to fund different projects, and do those projects, how do they compete with, and we've done all of this work on pathways and boardwalks and all of that, how do they compete against roads and IT? And for just my own personal belief is that they don't compete, because we've been able to do so much of that effort and that work in the last few years. I mean, just the boardwalk project alone was $1 million. The Green Bridge was $700,000, and the MSU to Lake Lansing pathway is millions. So philosophically, it's just where you're at. We could do that, and we could apply and put some of that effort into trails and others. We are going to use approximately $300,000 to $400,000, maybe $500,000 this year for roads on this project, or this year. But just in a few short months, we're going to be allocating for 2023. So we're going to need to know what dollars are there, because we might need those dollars sooner than what we think. So it's just, I think it's a philosophical discussion.
And I absolutely don't disagree with you. I guess my point was simply that, if we all agree, and maybe we don't, or maybe we do, that the $1.3 million is what we should spend on roads from the total ARP budget, right? The total ARP incoming money. We can, as a board, say, we agree that 1.3 is the right number. We only expect that we're going to need to spend $500,000 of it between now and October, when we allocate the second tranche of that funding. So if we know we're going to spend only $500,000 between now and then, and we also know that we're going to spend the $800,000 later, we can defer, allocating that $800,000 until later, and utilize that, the first tranche for these projects where we could better get our, use money quickly on some of these matching grants. That's all I was trying to get at.
Sure, and I get your point, and I respect your point, and everyone has a different philosophical view of this. My position on that would be like, there's so many other issues that we have. I take a look at what we've done and where the holes are at, and we've done so much in the trails and pathway area, my personal opinion, over the last 5 years. And we have so many holes, like the farmer's market, the windscreens, the cots that can improve our paramedics' daily world, and the security system, and all the other things. I'm just not, in my mind, I'm not sitting here telling you that I would even recommend that we set more money aside for pathways and trails. That would be my position. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I'd even recommend that we go that direction, because there's so many other things that we need to do in the next round.
And we might very well say that the windscreens or the cots are a higher priority than parks and trails. That's fine. I'm merely trying to make sure that, we're not saying, okay, we're earmarking all this money for roads, but we can't possibly spend it between now and when the next batch comes in. So let's find a way to more smartly, if we can buy the cots today and they can start helping, tomorrow, let's do that rather than, waiting 6 months for the next batch of money to come in. That's all I was trying to get at. And I think that, it might be more worthwhile to consider this as a holistic, $4 million, and strategically place the spending of that money at the right times based on when we expect it to come in. That's all I was trying to say.
Claire Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So for clarification, if I'm following this correctly, it's basically just saying, let's not lock us into this, because if there's a matching grant that opens up this year for cots or windscreens or whatever it may be, that we're not locked into this, so we get a matching grant for that, so we're actually doubling our money. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that correct?
More or less, yeah.
Okay, I get that. I just wanted to make sure I was clear in my mind with where he was. It wasn't necessarily about parks and pathways and trails, or it wasn't really a specific item. You're just saying, hey, if something comes up and we can double our money, let's not lock us into this. I totally get that.
Trustee Wilson.
But I think the opportunity for matching money is coming only that we can see into the park system and the trail system and so on. And what I hear Mr. Walsh saying is that that may not be where we need to put our money. In fact, we have some other issues on the table that we have taken a preliminary look at, and we need to go back and look at where those other allocations would be. I do get your point, though, that you are saying we'll spend $500,000 now, and we want that $800,000 if we're looking at $1.3 million total. So if we were to ensure that that $800,000 would come out of the second tranche of funding that comes in October, I understand where you're going with that, but I'm not comfortable with the fact that parks and the whole park system is in play right now, because I'm not certain that it is. So I'd like to hear other opinions.
I'd like to hear from the deputy.
Oh, Mr. Opsman.
Yeah, so clarification on this. We have had meetings with Consumers Energy. We have a 6-month timeline just to hear back on their right-of-ways in the first place. And then we've had preliminary conversations just to check in with the county on their millage funds. And right now, they project that they only have $700,000 available from the 6-year renewal. So they're pretty much tapped out. I would guess we will be going to them with increased cost as soon as we bid Phase 1 and Phase 2 of MSU to Lake Lansing, because all of our numbers are preliminary from a year or two ago. So I would hinder a guess that the $700,000 really isn't there. The only instance where we would be able to get the county millage money anytime soon is if a lot of projects get pushed back. And then that kind of frees up capacity if those projects were going to get pushed back into the renewal post 2026. I mean, one option that we discussed, but nothing, if you don't approve what's before you tonight won't impact pathway funding in any way for grant opportunities, because we have to first secure the consumer's easements anyway, and then we would have to look at writing grants for next year. So those opportunities have passed, but so we won't be negatively impacted in any way, shape, or form. But the county is the big win, and we probably won't be able to secure funding until the 2026 millage renewal, because they've already obligated 100% of the 6-year millage money in projects minus that $700,000 that I stated, but I believe that's going to be committed via overages due to construction costs. The county staff said 2025 would probably be their next open window for applications. Some county commissioners said they might like to see it in 23 or 24, but so we're a ways off, and we don't need a commitment on that. But I do need a commitment on the road funding so that I know how much to bid for, roughly speaking, so that I don't pay too much in engineering by, over forecasting how many miles we can do, or under forecasting and then having to come back. So I think there's still flexibility on pathways in the future.
Clerk Grafton.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I am in support of this, and I think that the township, from my experience with working with directors and the township manager, treasurer, previous treasurers, is that the township has always been really good about investing money and about looking for matching grants. And if there were an opportunity out there that I know the township manager, the deputy township manager, Director Maisner, Chief Plaga, whoever has brought those opportunities before the board for us to approve. And if the opportunity presented itself, I'm sure that it would be part of this tonight, and that I trust that the manager and his team have looked into what those available matching grants are, like I historically have seen the team do. And so I guess, while I understand, like, let's make sure that this opportunity is there, blah, 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 blah. And just maybe if the township manager, if Manager Walsh could just address real quick. I mean, I know that you and your team are consistently looking for matching grant opportunities, and that those have been looked at, and if those do present itself, that's something that you'll bring before the board like you normally do, is my assumption. I don't know if that's a question, but.
I guess I speak from, I try to, as the manager of the community, I try to keep my personal beliefs out of what I do because it's irrelevant, but I have to tell you that I have such a strong inclination for a lot of this funding to go to roads, because when I look at this money, it's in a lot of communities, it's just being, in my opinion, willy-nilly giving out to this or that or another thing. When I look at this, I look at what were the residents. If I went around and I pulled 100 residents in the community from all different neighborhoods, and we listed out a bunch of things, what would the overwhelming sentiment of the public be? And by the emails that Manager Opsimer receives and that I receive, and you see a lot of them, the number one complaint by far in this community is the condition of roads. So even if we aren't able to spend the $1.3 million, to me it's a messaging to the community that is our priority. We have listened to you, and we know we're seeing increased cost, and yeah, we might not be able to spend it this year, but who knows where things are going to go. So for me, we've studied, again, staff-wise, Mr. Opsimer and a number of us have studied this internally, and this is where we think the allocation. I understand the point that the trustee Hendrickson is making. It's a valid point. I just think this is the direction we should go. And when it comes time in October, when we receive our second round, then we can open it up to all the different projects that you'd like to do. And who knows? There might be 4 of you, a majority of you, who think that more money should go to roads. That would be up to you. I just think the message should be really clear to the public tonight. It's roads number 1 and fixing our IT system number 2. That's just where I'm at.
I get that. I guess what my question is that, maybe not it's a question, maybe it's a comment, is that I know that all efforts will be exhausted to find any matching grant opportunities for these 2 items if they were to exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they will. As to your point, Clerk Guthrie, that's the track record of the township amongst all departments.
Thank you.
Like what you're doing with security, same thing could be made for your department, what you're doing for some of the security things that you're looking at.
Yep.
Treasurer DeShane.
I think the township has an excellent record on pursuing matching grants.
Yes.
Look what we did at the Okemos Boardwalk. 80% of those costs were covered by matching grant. We paid only 20% of that cost of that project, if not less than that. Lake Lansing, MSU at Lake Lansing Pathways is full of matching money there for the township. So clearly our staff, Director Maisner, Manager Walsh, and others have a real talent for finding these matching funds when they're out there. But we made a commitment, and 4 of us at this table were on the board in 2019 when we put the millage for road improvements before our voters. We made a commitment to touch and fix and replace as many as necessary, 155 miles of roads. We come back and we say, well, we couldn't get to 155, we only got to 120. And then they say, well, why not? We say inflation. They say, well, what'd you do with your ARPA funds? Well, we didn't put any ARPA funds. Then we've been given a gift here to stay true to our word, which is we're going to fix 155 miles of roads. And I think it's an opportunity to take advantage of this high inflation, high material costs and labor costs that we're facing, and still meet our commitment we made to our residents. So it's the right use for this money to stay true to our word and repair and fix the roads that we said we were going to fix in 2022.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I think, and I certainly don't mean to, I know very well that the township will find and take advantage of any opportunities for matching grants that are available to them. And I completely understand and agree, though I wasn't on the board at the time, the commitment that this group and this body has made toward local roads. And I support and certainly am firm in my commitment to ensuring that that promise is kept to the voters of Meridian Township. I suppose what I would ask that we may want to consider in terms of, smart project management on this money is perhaps we're approaching this as a first round, second round appropriation when we should be considering the money in its totality, right? If we were having this discussion around how do we spend $4.5 million worth of ARP money, and we said, oh, well, we think, $2 million of that 4.5, just to throw out a number, forgive me, $2 million of that we believe to be for roads, right? We're going to spend $500,000 now, which we know we can spend this year, and the rest will come out of tranche 2. Then we can spend the other, another portion of that money on other projects that we can start right now, be they the cots or the windscreens or what have you. All I'm trying to do is make sure that we get the most the most we can as quickly as we can, right? If this board agrees that we can get cots, for example, in the first tranche of funding, and we can have them ready by whatever date, we're getting started 5-6 months sooner than we would be if we were just considering first round appropriation, roads, and IT. There's a reason why IT is in tranche 1, right? We want to get started on that project immediately, right? We want to get that started so that we can get it done quickly. My read of this memo and this discussion is that there's $970,000 that we can spend right now on IT. There's $500,000 that we can spend right now, but before October, on roads, so that we can meet our commitment. Everything else doesn't need to be spent at this exact moment. We can say, our priority is roads, we intend to spend more on roads, and we can have that greater discussion if we're talking about the appropriation of the ARP money in its entirety. But if we can get cots into, ambulances 5 months sooner by saying our commitment is strong to roads and we will spend more money on roads, we just also know that we can get cots and ambulances today, right? I think that's equally good messaging to our population, which certainly can understand that argument. I think they'll appreciate that we are appropriating the money in a smart fashion, in a timely fashion, so that we can get as many projects done as quickly as we can.
Trustee Wizards.
Thank you, Supervisor. In hearing this discussion, I know I appreciate what you're saying, Trustee Hendrickson, in that timing component. I do know that we've had several discussions, and one of the the thoughts that was put out there by the manager was being very careful of not spending a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, but thinking of it in totality. And that's when I remember the roads discussion and the IT discussions coming up. After hearing what Deputy Director Osmer said, that so we have an average of a 20% increase in cost. So we know we can spend this $500,000, but correct me if I'm wrong, you need to know how much is going to be there so you can start your budget for next year. Is that correct?
So the way that, thank you, Trustee Wazinski. So the way that we are going to do the roads moving forward, especially given inflation, is we are going to give our engineering firm a list of the roads, a tentative list that is private. It's not released publicly. They will go out and do their engineering assessment. One of the pitfalls that we ran into this winter was snow delay. They can't inspect the curb and gutter. They can't take core samples when the soil is frozen and the roads are frozen. So it delayed our engineering. So we want to get them the roads to engineer it. And we're also, this is kind of an aside, but it is a legal requirement. We're doing our second round of bonding, right? Because we're bonding for 3 years, 4 years, over the 10 years. And so the second round of bonding has to be obligated. We have to obligate 5% within 6 months So we actually need to get that contract in hand to then pay a retainer to obligate 5% of the bonds. So that's just another timing aspect. So the idea is to do the engineering this summer, have them ready to go to bid in November when we can get the lowest, get the contract signed by the end of December, obligate by end of December or January. And so what I would like to know, one way or another, is how much is going to go into roads this year and next year so that we can pick the lane miles accordingly. And then, so that we're not paying too much on the soft cost, right, the engineering cost. I don't want to take, we will try to push the envelope a little bit and maybe take a few extra core samples and then inspect maybe an extra half mile of road. And we can trim off a half mile or a mile if we need to when the bids come in, doing it this way rather than just kind of fingers crossed. And I mean, we did see 34% increases. Right now, if we have 1 mile left to bid, it's our crush and shape, meaning it's no curb and gutter roads, so it's ditch roads. And if that comes in with a 20% increase, which would be excellent, that would be $430,000, and our total road plan would be $4.69 million, when we only have 3.7 budgeted, roughly, because we spend 3.5 from the millage strictly on the crush and shape and the milling reconstructs. And then we take some of the general fund and we pay our soft cost engineering, Manick and Smith, and we take some of that and we pay the PM work, the preservation and maintenance work. So I really need a rough idea if we're going to flip this on its head, because I'm no longer giving a list of roads in December to the engineering firm. I'm giving them a list of roads probably the end of this month. I have the tentative list. We have our new finance director on hand. So we're going to go over some of our finances, and then I'm going to take Manager Walsh out and drive the roads that we've selected thus far once we kind of firm up our financials. We've got a lot of moving parts because we've still got 3 roads that are outstanding under contract from 2021 for milling work up in White Hills Lakes. That is going to start right after Memorial Day. We went ahead and started after the holiday for the neighbors, and then we've got all the 2021 PM work. So that's an existing contract, and I just found out today that that one's roughly $25,000 over what we expected, and that's 2021 and 2022 just for the crack seal portion, and that's based on the tar bags. We pay based on the pound of tar, and the cracks are just a little bit wider, and the tar is seeping deeper into the cracks, so just the volume and our unit cost went up. It's not a labor factor, it's just a material factor. We actually collect the tabs from every bag so that we can confirm how many units were put on the road. So I just got that assessment this morning. So that's the timeline that I'm operating under, and that's why it would be nice to have a commitment on what are we spending not only this year, but next year. And so right now, I mean, the fact that we're roughly $1 million over, I mean, we do have a little bit of fund balance left. Roughly, we think $450,000, but I mean, we're going to need a significant chunk. We're going to need roughly $600,000, $700,000. If we come in at 30 to 35%, which is what we really should, we're going to be another 30,000 higher. We're going to be right at 4.7 million on the button.
Thank you. I have one more follow-up question.
Yes, of course.
This would be for Manager Walsh, I believe. So if we appropriate this 1.3 million to roads, is there a time limit on when we spend that funding?
No.
So knowing it's there for Deputy Manager, we're not at risk for not spending that funding.
We are not. All you're doing is making it clear to our staff what's there and how to plan in the coming months.
Okay.
That's it.
So it's really just a timing issue then when it comes to other things that we may want to consider.
That's correct. But we'll be right back at the table in 4 or 5 months in October, right back at the table talking about the second round and where the board wants to allocate. And at that time, we might have better idea about the road money for 2023 and what might be needed out of that second round.
Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So I am hearing no objections from this body to a spend of $1.3 million on the roads. Is that accurate? Yes. So then it sounds like it's just a matter of how much money we need in 2022 versus how much money we will need into the future, 2023. Is that accurate? Of the 1.3 million, about 500,000 needs to be spent in this year. Is that correct? Or more?
A little, it could be 5, it could be 600,000. We have a fund balance. We're still getting bids in, but that's the ballpark, correct?
So in order to Trustee Hendrickson's comments, is there any reason why we cannot say we are making a commitment to $1.3 million, but we will take 500,000 to 600,000 out of the first tranche of funding and the balance out of the second tranche of funding, and that will be a guarantee to the manager and to staff to move ahead with their plans? Can you comment on that? Whether that will work?
Yeah, that's another way of doing it. We can do it however the board, that's why we're here to have this discussion, and critical thinking is why we're all here, right? It's not just to say, sure. So there's different ways to do this. I don't like that way as well, and I'll tell you why. Because we're working right now on shaping the 2023 roads. We want to know that that funding's there, and it helps Deputy Manager Opsummer to plan, and accordingly, here's the other issue I have, is that you start spending the other $800,000 or $500,000 or $800,000 on other things, right?
Oh.
What if, you start allocating it towards things, right? Because if you're not going to allocate it to other things, why would you do it this way? So if you start allocating it to other things, what happens in a few more months if the road situation gets really bad, and then we're thinking, you know what, instead of doing this or this, which was kind of a want, we now have a need, and we kind of we kind of allocate it towards some wants, and our need is really what it's a philosophical discussion about what you really want to see, where the money to go. I'm suggesting we follow where staff and the administration has this tonight and into the future, and it still allows you to do other things. But if you feel like, if you're of the opinion, because there's other opinions, if you feel like the opinion that, you know what, that 1.3 is about all I'm willing to do with roads, and I want to allocate the rest of the money towards other things, and if you feel that way, then we should change direction tonight and start allocating the other money towards other things. That's not where I think we should go. I think we should really keep the roads at the top of the list. We're seeing a 30% increase. We've made a promise to our residents. That's just where I'm at. But again, it's a philosophical discussion, and one that starts and ends with the 7 of you, not the administration.
Trustee, I'm Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. I think the problem with doing that is that would foreclose the idea of us taking the second tranche and put another 1.3 million or some number towards 2024, 2025. Because we're very likely to need this additional money to meet the goals that we've set for ourselves for roads. Now, if we want to say to the voters, oh, it got too expensive, we're going to back down on our promise we made to you, then this board can do that. But that's not my intention, is to say to the public, they got too expensive, so we had to back down. We may need this money to keep the promise we made. And that's why, to me, to say we're going to spend $400,000 in the first tranche, or $500,000 and $800,000 of the second, we're basically saying that's the limit of that's all we're going to spend on roads. And to keep our promises, we may need to spend it all. That's my opinion.
That would not be my intent.
Okay. I just want to clarify as to what your intention was.
Hendrickson.
Right, and so in the theoretical world that you just described, what you're suggesting is that if, and what Manager Walsh, I think, was getting at as well, is that, okay, if we say $600,000 of this current money, and we say, absolutely, we're going to spend $700,000 in round 2 toward the roads, right? 1.3 million overall. That doesn't preclude us from saying, when it comes time to allocate tranche 2, we need to add 700 more to the 700 we already said we were going to spend, right? If that's something that the board decided to do. We can have that conversation. We can have that conversation later. I guess the operative question would be, okay, we've identified $970,000 as sacrosanct toward IT tonight, right? That seems to be at least the one thing that everyone is in firm agreement on in this first tranche of funding. So the question then becomes, do we expect the rest of it to be for roads? And if the answer is no, all I've heard from Assistant Manager Officer tonight is, give me a sense, or give me an idea, give me a plan for how much you think you're going to spend. Right now, we think, based on the manager's suggestion, we're going to spend 1.3 million. If it's more than that, we can tell him we plan on spending 1.3 million without precluding us from putting more of the second tranche in. If he tells us we need $600,000 today, there's $700,000 we can spend on other things now, right? And all that we're saying by doing that is, down the road, there's $700,000 of this whole pot of money that's remaining that we are not going to spend on roads. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. I think there were a number of quick items that were of high value to the residents of the community, the COTS being one of them, that we could expend that money on in the short term without hamstringing ourselves down the road with the ability to add additional money to the roads if we had to.
Mr. Walsh.
Just real quick, I think one of the things we're not considering tonight is that we have a list a mile long of roads that need to be done, that are 1s and 2s. The people are complaining, the people are upset, and rightfully so. It's taken us, quite some time to get to where we want to get to. And I'm of the opinion that if the board were to move forward with this additional funds, that I would go to the deputy manager and say, let's spend it. Take a look at 4 or 5 more roads. Let's amend the contract we have this year, and let's add and get some additional roads done, and let's allocate and spend the entire $1.3 million this year if possible. That's how urgent it is to get to the roads that we have, because we all see the emails. That's the one thing this community is, well, there's a whole other issue in this community that doesn't involve us, but as far as the township, it's the roads. And that's what we should be going after and attacking, is what we're hearing from. And if we have the additional funds allocated, again, it's up to you, but if we have those allocated this year, we might be able to spend them this year and get further ahead on our roads.
I guess that's great news.
That's critical information.
Right. That's huge information, because my whole premise for everything I've been saying this evening is we can't spend more than X dollars in 2022. If you're telling me that we can get ahead of ourselves on the road program and add more roads to 2022, that changes my perspective entirely, right? I need to know that that's the case, right? And is that what is that 1.3 million going to get us if that's what we're planning on spending in this short term? I'm concerned that you don't know the answer to that. I know you don't know the answer to that, because we're flipping the way the model works for road funding, right? We have to do that analysis first.
I only know one thing. It'll be less expensive. That other $800,000 will get us further in 2022 than it will in 2023 because of additional cost. I can't promise you tonight. I can almost assure you that if we come up with additional 4 or 5 roads, and we give that to our contractor, we add it as an addendum, I'm pretty sure we can get those roads done this year. But again, we have to have the commitment from the board, before we can do that, move forward.
Well, thank you. That's an entirely different ball of wax than I've been, that's an assumption that I've had that's been wrong. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's a very important piece of information.
Trustee Wilson.
So, Madam Supervisor, given that we've gotten clarification that there could be work that will be done, I'm fully in support of giving the 1.3 million and the 970,000 as the first tranche of funding right now to those 2 projects, roads and infrastructure.
other trustees? Is that the consensus of the group? And so the proposal that's before us is to commit immediately to, one, the roads, $1.3 million, and two, the IT bill.
$970,000.
Right. And so now what should happen is that, and this is kind of the introduction and decision-making part. The next thing is that you will bring us a
motion.
A motion, a resolution at our next meeting to do just this.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, this, one more concern I have is this merely settles our commitment for the spending of the first tranche. It does not make any commitments for our spending the second tranche. It settles the question of how the first tranche is spent. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. That's what we will be looking for at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Item 13C, township signage. I believe, is that Mr. Opsimer?
It is.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor and board members. Happy to be before you this evening to present the 2022 Township Signage Project. So this has been a plan that's been in the works for about 7 years. Actually, Clerk Guthrie worked on this when she was on staff with the township, and Director Perry, or Assistant Deputy Manager Perry, worked on this for many years before he departed us earlier this year. And so this was before the board back in November. As you recall, we basically had this menu option of signs that we worked with Corbin Design on. Corbin is a local Michigan business, and they do signs for universities, local units of government, private sector businesses. And so this is basically the menu option that was presented to the board at that November meeting. And at that time, there was a couple of changes that the board requested on the actual design of the signs, one of which was the tail on the sign right here. We had cut that off due to concerns about its durability. But the board wanted to add that back in, and then we had a discussion more broadly about where would we like to focus our attention outside of the obvious, which is the north, east, south, and west entrance signs to the community. And so during that board meeting, the board gave input that they would like to see a plan for the municipal complex and to begin our work here. And so the municipal complex plan is in your packet, as well as some other needs that we've identified. So the marketplace on the green does not have a sign, and we would like to put one of the e-board signs over at the marketplace so that we can more prominently display the farmers market and promote the services offered at that facility. Obviously today we have our Parks and Rec and our DPW crews go around the township and change out the banners on our vinyl signposts. And so that e-board sign would take the place of the vinyl signposts in front of the marketplace. And then we also added a couple of other new parks that do not have existing signs. So we added Newton and Towner Road parks. And so that is the sign plan that's before you tonight. We have done a thorough vetting, and we have taken this opportunity to update how we communicate with residents and how we label the facilities. For instance, the police department is still labeled as the public safety building on both the signs on Marsh Road and Central Park Drive and the lettering on the building. That lettering will come down as part of this plan, and it will be labeled as the police department, and it will get a sign like this denoting it as the police department down in front of the building, as well as signage on the doors into the station itself. So if you go and look at the signage out on Marsh Road and Central Park, it actually still denotes that, or gives the impression that fire administrative staff are still over here in the municipal complex. So a long-awaited project. We think everything is in good order. We have exhausted all of our fees with Corbin at this point that are for the design and for developing the plan. The remaining fees that we have with Corbin are for helping us select the best fabricator and sign manufacturer, and to help do inspections to make sure that the signs are built to the specifications provided. If you go to the very beginning of the sign inventory, the specifications are listed here on the first 4 pages, actually five pages. It's highly precise down to the exact paint that is used on the aluminum posts, the gauge of the aluminum that is used, and everything else. I can tell you, having reviewed the file that I inherited from Mr. Perry, that we've been through numerous sign renditions, and some of them I would not speak very favorably of. So this project has come a long way, and will do service to the new brand that we established back in 2016 or 2017. We've also given a lot of thought to the wayfinding component. So this sign will actually this is the sign that will be prominently displayed on Marsh Road by the curb cut into the municipal complex. We are highlighting the historical village. And then on the other sign that will go on Central Park, we are highlighting Central Park. So we're trying to be multifaceted in the wayfinding approach to promote the various services that are inside this complex. And part of the plan also is to refurbish and to relocate the existing historical village sign that'll go over near the actual parking facility for the historical village if you look at the sign plan. We felt like that sign aesthetically fit with the historical village, and so we're basically just going to kind of breathe new life into it and relocate it over there at the municipal complex. It'll be located right here where sign 12 is. So that is a rough overview of the plan. Right now, our final steps are securing easements for the east, west, and south sign. We had a very productive meeting with a gentleman who represents the cooperative for the office park at the south location. So we were trying to get an easement for an undeveloped parcel that they own. It's their open space parcel. And then we've had productive conversations with the ownership of IHOP, and we are still trying to reach the resident at the corner of Meridian Road and Grand River. So that is a quick overview. Happy to answer any questions you have, and very happy to see this project finally moving forward.
Mr. DeShane.
Thank you, Deputy Director Opsimer. We're really glad to see this moving forward, too. I certainly am. This is going to be excellent, and I appreciate the work that was done 7 years ago by Clerk Guthrie and her staff and others since then. Has the easement for the Hazlitt Road sign been granted yet, and where is that sign?
So we actually own the parcel itself. So the parcel number is denoted. It's an undeveloped parcel, so it does not have an address, and we own that parcel. So that one is a go. And that one we have no hurdles to cross.
Is that at the approximately Park Lake Road and Hazlitt Road?
That one, I can actually pull up a map.
Because right now there's a welcome to Hazlitt sign along Hazlitt Road.
Oh, you're talking about that one. There's a history to that one, and it was in the sign plan when I inherited it, and I had that sign removed. The Hazlitt Beautification Association did that, and so we don't want to touch that sign. They put a lot of time and investment into that, and I believe it was installed in 2013 or 2014, so it's not that old. But that was an effort led by the Hazlitt Beautification Association, so that sign will stay. And we've just kind of considered it to be outside of the scope of this project.
I get you. My problem, I think HBA does great things. My problem with that sign is it's about a half a mile into the township, and so people can, coming down Hazlitt Road, they say, welcome to Hazlitt. Well, Hazlitt, as Trustee Opsimer, or Trustee Sundlin will tell you, she lives way before that sign there, and she's from Hazlitt, okay? And people closer to Park Lake Road are also part of the Hazlitt School District, Meridian Township, but you haven't got to the sign when you're at their house, and that's my issue with that sign. Is it seems like the location should have been chosen closer to the township border.
Yeah, I think it was intended to be more of a welcoming sign for downtown Hazlitt.
Okay.
And that isn't denoted on the sign, but that was the intention. And obviously, the Hazlitt Beautification Association maintains all the beds, right, as we know,
they did
throughout the downtown. So that was their project, separate from the township. I believe Mr. Perry may have given them some assistance through that project. But that and the Nokomis Center, given the nature of those entities, we've kind of just left them out of this plan conceptually. So Director Maisner did reach out to the Nokomis Center. But if there's interest, we could engage the Hazlet Beautification Association and have a conversation with them. We obviously communicate with them regularly on watering their beds, and we just did some irrigation work for them on the Triangle property. And then it seems like there's one other endeavor that we're
So are you
working on
going to
over
show
there
us
now.
where on Hazlet Road that sign is going to go?
Yep. It's going to go right here. As you can see, we own this parcel. And so it's just south of Towner Road. This is Towner. This is Marsh Road. And so this is the parcel that we own where the existing sign is today. And if you go to, let me find the exact item. So this is the existing one in front of IHOP today. And we can't find record of the easement. It's possible there's an easement, but that record has been lost if there was one.
For the sign at IHOP.
Yep, correct. So we do have a new easement drafted and a letter out to them, and we have made contact with them. So this is the existing Marsh Road sign. Let me blow up the pictures here. So this is the entrance sign on the north end of the community today. We own the parcel and would put the new sign up there. And the back of the sign is blue, and the white font type does denote that you are now leaving a prime community. So it has our brand embedded on the back of the sign. And aesthetically, the welcoming signs, the veneer flagstone was picked, you know, for its earth tones and to kind of fit with our brand, and obviously the blue, the blue is picked straight from our color code from our new brand. And you'll notice when you look through the sign inventory, the green is used to denote parks and preserves. So we use that green from our brand for park signs. We use the blue for municipal and like welcoming. So it's also color coding. You know, the colors are speaking to the resident about the service offered at that facility, right?
Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment and appreciate the people who made this possible tonight. And also, I want to thank the clerk. I mean, this started with you many, many years ago, and it's taken us a long time to get here tonight. I want to also remember and recognize former Supervisor Legoff. This was an important project to Betsy, getting new entry signs. We weren't able to get it done while she was here, but I'll be sending her some pictures of these signs. I really want to thank, we made a commitment to the team and the board and the community when we brought on Melissa Massey as our project manager, and we said bringing her on is going to augment the work of Mr. Opsimer and get us moving forward on some projects. And she's only been here 2 months. And this project has moved forward more with her leadership than in the last probably 3 years. So I want to compliment, she wanted to be here tonight, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, she's not able to be here. But I want to thank Director Massey for her work on this project. And I know she's been a great assistance to Manager Opsimer. Thank you.
Yeah, this project would not be before you tonight, just given the time needed to just review and respond. Melissa and I both went through the sign project as we inherited it and built it out from there. But every set of plans as they come back, you know, things are missed or omitted, changes and revisions that we've requested. And it can seem like a minor point, but it can be pretty important when it's the address and it's what terminology you want to use for the police department. And when you look through the plans, they are comprehensive because these specs will go into the bid documents. And so one sign might denote police department, and then another sign would still say public safety, for instance. So like the pedestrian wayfinding, so we just don't, we don't want the fabricators to use plans and then we end up with a sign that makes us look foolish. So this project would not be before you tonight without that new position. And I would also thank Jay Graham with my department as well. Jay has helped us with each location to make sure that we're not putting the sign when you're working in or near the right-of-way. We need to make sure that we're not putting our sign over our sanitary or other underground utilities. So placement at the marketplace was a little tricky, but we were able to fit it in minus the flower bed or the planter box.
Okay. Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Thank you as well for bringing this through to fruition and your team for certain. I do have a couple questions. One, what happens to the old signs?
They would be recycled. The old entrance signs are wood, so we could recycle them at our transfer center.
Do you keep any of them? Do you
We
keep the
could if
western
we
sign
want
out
them
front with the
for-
175th thing in it, or?
Yeah, that one is just outside, so we could keep that if there's a desire to keep it. And
Not up, but somewhere stashed in a basement.
we could store them at the service center. There comes a time where we have to evaluate whether or not we're hoarding or if we're retaining something of value.
I don't know if it's of historical value, just a question.
We could retain some of the signs at the service center for the time being as we decide what we want to do long term, but yeah, the oldest.
Listen, I understand you got to find a place for records above that. I get it. My second question: how does this electronic messaging work? Who manages that? Who puts that together? Is
So
it
it's-
tied to the website?
Yeah, it's a full LED board, so you could actually put whatever you want on it. We will adhere to the standards of our community, which is that it changes once a day. If there's a very, maybe this time of the year we celebrate Meridian, it might change like twice a day just to rotate the farmer's market and celebrate. But so it is a full LED board. That's the specification, but it's pretty much just going to be used as a matrix board, which means it's, big pixels, so it'll look like a matrix board.
Well, I'm very excited to see this and hopefully relieve our DPW team members from having to go and put up signs next to the township signs. I'm happy to streamline their process of things that they need to do, and that's probably not one of them. So I'm very glad to see that go up.
And these two signs, the one on Marsh and then the one at the marketplace on the green, require special use permit approval, so that will go before the Planning Commission Monday evening.
Oh.
And then I have a couple of questions on the back of the sign when it says "Thanks for visiting Meridian Township." If you could bring that up real quick.
I know it's in here somewhere, but or it was in an
Down.
earlier version of the plan. Let me sift through real
You
quick.
showed it.
There
Oh, right
is.
there, right there. Down. Yep,
Yep.
right.
I'm just trying to go slow. The sensitivity on the touchpad is set really high.
So I know you talked about aesthetics and it's done and blah blah blah, but in this regard, they missed the tail on that. So just missed. I
No,
don't
it's
know.
right here.
They missed coloring it. Like it's just like this white thing. The rest of it's blue. It doesn't even blend in together. So it's just like I don't know if they can make any kind of changes like that. If that's something we can do and send to them, and that was missed. It just seems odd to me. It doesn't make any sense.
The thought was it would blend in more if it was white, so that it wouldn't stand out, so that it would look like a perfect oval. You'll see that the tree, or actually I think that's the home, and then the tree is sticking out or protruding a little bit here.
Oh, that's
so
what's
the
on
thought was that
those
the
sleeves.
white wouldn't highlight the irregular shape of the logo itself. If you're looking at the logo, it's not a perfect oval.
Right.
But the intent was that the back of the sign aesthetically from a distance would look like a perfect oval because that white wouldn't really jump out at you.
Was there any thought about the entire thing being an oval so that all of it was within the oval? So that you don't have that tail when you see that municipal complex sign, you don't have the tail on both sides showing?
So if we're looking at the front, the problem is from this vantage point then, that blue would be protruding around the logo on the other side. Does that make sense? Because if we oversize that oval on the back of the sign, then this front perspective would have a weird blue oval silhouette around it that doesn't conform to the brand standards. We were trying to keep the exact white border that we maintain. This sign behind us was one of the first early prints where the sign fabricator missed the white border, right? So.
And I broke that tail and had to glue it back on, by the way.
Let's hope that's not a sign of things to come for the wayfinding signs, or the welcoming signs. So that's
kind of why I asked that question about encompassing it all in the oval. Yeah.
Yeah, the only challenge is then it kind of disrupts the aesthetic of the front of the sign, because we'd have this weird oval shape around the logo that isn't
because it have a lot of white border.
Yeah, yep.
Right, okay.
Because we can't make it translucent, right, on the front side, because there's a solid blue coating on it on the back side. So it's just that inverse relationship. If you look at, let me zoom out. Because these are all double-sided signs. So if you look at the sign menu, you'll notice that the welcoming sign is not double-sided in terms of logo, right? We have the blue background. So there is no tail protruding out here because there's no logo on the back side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But on these, you do see the tail protrude out here on this side because there's logos on both sides, right? For north and, well, in this case, east and west traffic on Central Park for this sign. And then in the case of this sign, there's a logo on both sides for north and southbound traffic on Marsh Road. And so you can see the tail protruding out there, denoting that there's a logo on both sides.
I just have one final aesthetic question. Central Park South, the Central Park South sign, the font is not italicized, but in the internal guard sign, the font for the Parks and Historical Village is italicized. Is that, I thought maybe they were all supposed to be the same, or it's easier to read non-italicized signs. It's really difficult to read italicized signs. I don't know, maybe I just had eye surgery and I'm having difficulty anyways, but it's just hard in general to read italicized. That's actually a mistake on Central Park. That was the purpose of tonight. Okay. That should be non-italicized. The Historical Village was being italicized because of its historical nature. So we were just trying to keep the brand for the Historical Village. Okay. So actually, yeah, Central Park should be the same font type as the police department, the Nakoma Center, and the Home TV. It should simply just have the green backdrop, denoting that it's a park or a preserve. Thank you. That'll be.
We can make that correction.
Thank you. And then I'm not sure if I've received an answer about how you answered how many times the messaging board could be changed today, but I didn't hear how it was going to get there from A to B. Yep, it'll depend on who our sign manufacturer is, but it'll be a computer system, probably cloud-based, meaning you log in, you go to a website and log in, and then you can change the content. So Director Maisner will probably control the marketplace on the green, or her designee. And then for the municipal complex, that'll probably fall to my office, and we'll probably update that. Is it a transponder? It depends. Do you have to dig trenches? Yeah, it depends. We simply specify that it needs to be an LED board. Okay. From there, it's up to those bidding to give us additional specifications. Thank you. Those were all. And again, please pass along to Melissa, since she's not here, my gratitude for getting this project through, and everyone else who worked on the project. Those are all my questions. Absolutely.
Okay. I saw Treasurer DeShane first.
Dan, quick question about, there's a sign now on Dobie Road, right at Jolly Road, that's like a 24 by 18 steel sign, looks like a MDOT kind of sign saying, "Welcome to Meridian Township." Are you familiar with that sign?
Yep.
Are we going to do anything with those type of signs, Adobe, Vanetta, Green, all the other places where people come into the township and it's a welcome sign?
Nope, those are just standard signs that are put up by the road department or MDOT. So those will stay. There's one at the top of the hill on Marsh Road when you enter the northern limit, and those actually denote the actual boundary of the township. So those will stay. These will roughly be on the border. If we can secure the easement for Meridian and Grand River, that one actually will be at the boundary of the township, right? The others are not quite going to be on the boundary. So those ones that denote the standard road signs will stay.
Okay. And do we have those at each of those entrances? I see the one at Adobe all the time, but I don't see the other ones.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
There's one on Okemos Road, just north of Jolly Road, too.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Wizetsky.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm off target here. I guess overall question was how, it says here you worked in a team, including Director Maisner, but how did you choose which park signs you were going to do first? And I asked that because we're going to have 2 main signs around the municipal, including Central Park, then Central Park South, then the Marketplace. It seems like they're all very, I guess, localized, and then we have Towner and the other 2.
So Director Maisner picked the final list of signs that she wanted to include. Central Park South was picked because it's literally across the street from the Marketplace, so just continuity-wise. And she wants to kind of evaluate and see how it goes, and then decide which parks to build out from. In terms, I mean, the cost would be, these are not cheap signs. The cost to do all of the parks would be pretty astronomical, and then to add the preserve. So she picked based on the signs that are the parks that are in most need of signs, which is the Marketplace, Towner, Newton, the new parks, right? And then Central Park South because it's across the street from one of the parks that we're doing, and then Central Park because we're doing the complex as a whole.
Got it. Thank you.
Anyone else? So if I might summarize, your point tonight was to have us review and make final suggestions, as limited as you've allowed, on the design and the placement. You don't need anything from us at this point.
No.
Yes.
This will come back in the form of a second quarter or third quarter budget amendment for you at some point. But tonight I don't need anything. This is just a final public vetting of the actual plan itself to find any issues, which we've identified one, the italic font for Central Park on the Wayfinding, before we go to bid. So now we would go to bid, and then we will have additional vetting that occurs at the pre-construction meeting with whoever our vendor ultimately is for the sign project.
And then we'll start seeing them come through Planning Commission for location vetting.
2 signs.
Only two of the signs.
The e-boards require a special use permit. So any electronic sign requires a special use permit. The others don't need any further approval.
All right, and one more question. Timeline. You have any sense about timeline?
I don't think
Or
anything
what you
will prevent
presented
us from getting it completed this year, with the lone exception of the easements that are needed for 3 of the signs. One other factor that could come into play, there's been some discussion about requiring the parcel at Hazlitt and Park Lake Road, northeast corner. That could be a welcoming sign location. So if we did somehow secure that for land preservation, we could put the sign there if we didn't secure the Grand River easement. So traffic volume's higher in Grand River, we would prefer that location, but we're also bidding, we're gonna bid with lighting and without lighting to illuminate, the welcoming signs at night, so we'll see what the bids come in at.
Okay. No further questions, comments? Thank you very much. Thank your the team, many people that you've worked with over the years for all the work that's gone into this. I certainly appreciate it, as you've heard my fellow board members do that, and thank you for letting us know what was going on.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson.
We come now to item 13D, and we will hear from Director Clark.
Hello again. I'm very excited about this one, actually, and I've been telling myself I'm not going to get excited, so don't pay too much attention to my smile on my face. 1655 and 1621 rest in the Hazlet Pika. They are the two remaining parcels available for purchase at what we consider Hazlet Village Square, the intersection of Marsh and Hazlet Road and Hazlet. We have a very strong developer out of Holland, Michigan, that is proposed a mixed-use, a horizontal mixed-use development at the site. And we've been in discussion with the development team since last May on feasible options for the concept, as well as incentives to get the project built. Taking you back to some history, the project has been owned by the same property owners for 40 years. So when you're thinking about purchasing a property from a developer sense, the uncap, right, the large taxes that will soon be responsible of the new developer, the new property owner, are going to be extensive, right? So we've sat down with the developer a few times to discuss how do we feasibly bring forward this major redevelopment that will provide public amenities, public space, commercial space, and necessary housing in Hazlet. Again, another comment I could make is that Hazlet does not have very large parcels available for housing redevelopment options. We're butting up into some interesting development space for the schools as far as getting new families in, and so this is one of those components that could help bring in additional new families. Today, we are asking for the board we are recommending to the board to establish a commercial rehabilitation district. This is a part of Public Act 210 of 2005. There are two commercial tax exemptions that can be applied to properties. We are going after the rehabilitation exemption. This is one that is applied to commercial properties that have been in existence for 15 years and have a food establishment in them. So many of you would know that the old L&L went out in 2011, and they're going to convert the property to a multifamily residential. The premise of the program freezes the value of the taxable value on the buildings. So the value of the land will stay the same, but the taxable value of the buildings will freeze at its current value. To give you a little bit of a hint of what's going on, there's only two functioning businesses in the complex as it stands right now. That's the Fringe Hair Design and Little Caesars. The value of the property continues to be decreased every year by the assessor due to its obsolescence. And we, as the tax authorities, do not share more than $80,000 annually on the value of that land. So we could expect, if no improvements are made to the property, for it to continue to decrease, right? It's not really giving us anything. It's a huge parking lot, unattended. It's a huge eyesore. It's in our Pika, and we've discussed this as a viable option to redevelop. So the commercial exemption would apply basically a new tax to the property for 10 years. And this new tax is what they are currently paying. So we are not missing out on anything for the establishment of the district. We will continue to pay what they are paying currently. And at the end of the 10 years, into the 11th year, it'll be as if they purchased the property at that time, and the full value, taxable value, will be applied, and the full taxes will be paid to all the authorities. If we were to do no improvements over the next 20 years, the township and the other tax authorities would share in about $1.6 million for 20 years. If we do provide the exemption, which would freeze the taxable value of the increase of the buildings for 10 years, we could share in $13 million. So there's a very large opportunity for improvement. Another great thing about this exemption is that it's performance-based. If the developer does not do the improvements on the value of the land, then obviously the buildings do not have an increase in value, and so therefore their total tax increase that they would pay us, or in general their entire portfolio, would not be as great. We do have a discussion with the developer also of using brownfield. So again, both performance-based tax incentives applied to this property. They've got to do the work in order to get what's going to come out of it. The establishment of the district takes some time. It can be done with promotion of the property owners, or in our case, the local unit of authority, which is the township. We would establish a resolution creating the district, and our proposal is to create the first commercial rehabilitation district #1 in the township for 1655 and 1621 specifically. So those would be the specific Hazlet #1 district. Communities are allowed to do more than one district, so this does not tie us down to not having additional districts for other redevelopment opportunities. Once that freeze is applied, we establish that resolution. We would submit a copy of that resolution to certified mail to the county. They have 28 days to reject our proposal for the establishment of the district. The county and the township are really the only entities that are majorly affected by the freeze of the taxes. Again, the land value stays the same, and that value, as it increases, gets paid to the tax authorities. So this is for building value only, really, essentially. After the establishment of the district, the developer or developers could come to the township with an application that is an application that we submit with our township clerk that gets submitted to the state tax commission with specifications of the value that would be applied to the property after the 10-year exemption. So once it is submitted to the state tax commission, they go through their process, and if they approve it, they will submit a certificate to the developer, and that will be the freeze for the 10 years. After the 10 years, we will unfreeze it, basically uncap, and we get the full amount of the value at that time. It is an annual report required by the assessing department. They have to submit that by every end of October, basically acknowledging that the certificate is still in effect, that the value, that no improvements have been made on the property before the certificate was in effect, and just continuing to let the state tax commission know we are still have the certificate applied to this area. Today we went to Mount Pleasant to view a constructed project that used a commercial exemption. They did not use the PA 210, but they did use several exemptions to get that 4-story building put into the ground. It's a beautiful, beautiful project. It's no skin off the city of Mount Pleasant. And I think that's what I like the most about this exemption, is that establishing the district doesn't do anything to the township. There's nothing up front that the township has to pay. It's just administrative work. So following through the timeline, if everything on my Disneyland list of things happen with this project, we go through the approval of the MUPUD with Planning Commission at the same time of establishing that commercial rehabilitation district. So we would come back with a public hearing. We hold that public hearing. The Township Board could move for action to adopt a resolution establishing that district. We submit the letter to the county, fingers crossed, that they have no rejection of that item, and we would have the district established. We were able to sit down with some county commissioners and the controller this week as well. They had a few questions, but really more of, what are we currently getting out of the property, and it's very little, and what is the possibility of gaining on the property, and it's very much. Questions?
Okay, questions? Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Clark, for bringing this before us. This is a really exciting opportunity if I'm understanding what it is exactly. So, devil's advocate here. What happens if we said no?
If we said no, the developer needs this incentive to get this project going forward.
That's what I needed to
They
hear.
would
Thank
not
you.
purchase the property, and we would still be looking at a very ugly site.
Not suggesting that we do that, to be clear. I just would like to know what the stakes are in front of us.
Yes, these incentives are necessary for pushing the project forward.
Got it. Thank you. Crystal clear. Everything else I have, well, every other question I have, I think, related to this is related to not the Hazlet area, so I will save that for you for an offline discussion so we don't take this meeting into the 4-hour-long territory. But thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments? Treasurer DeShane.
I too was impressed by the CRA we visited today in Mount Pleasant. And it seems to be an excellent way to provide an incentive for the development to take place without us having to drain or redouble our funding of the Meridian Development Fund, such as the Village of Okemos is asking for. Tell me a little more about this timeline, that once this is approved, the developer then establishes what the value will be in 10 years?
No.
Okay.
Once we establish the district, the developer can bring forward an application. The application will specify what parcels, property description, what is to be done to the property. There is a method for calculating the taxable value, and that is only important when we actually submit the application to the State Tax Commission. That'll be done by the assessor. They take the taxable value minus the value of the land and some other fancy terminology of all of the other mills, and give a value to that on the application. After we submit it to the State Tax Commission, which I think is kind of like a formal process on their side, they look at the certificate and they acknowledge that dollar amount. So there are tons of examples on michigan.gov/property taxes. You can see those certificates. It gives the description of the property, the developer, the location of the property, and then specifies what that value is that they get to freeze over the 10 years.
The base value or the projected value?
The projected value.
Projected value. Okay. So if the developer is slow in developing this and doesn't get them all done the first couple of years, we'll say, they don't get to extend the 10 years. Is that correct?
There's no extension to the 10 years.
Okay. So the incentive, this is the performance space that you were talking about earlier. The incentive is there for the developer to get the development done the first year or 2 or 3 at most of the 10 years so that they maximize their tax incentive.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
What do you think the county will do with this? Do you have any perspective on whether the county will accept this Commercial Rehabilitation Act for this parcel, knowing what little taxable value it has today?
From the meeting that we had with the 3 members, it was positive. They gave some general direction on how to introduce the discussion with the county and maybe some thoughts of how to best frame this conversation. Much of it focused on, tell the county commission members, what is the value right now? What are we getting out of the project right now? And what is the projection of getting it in the future? I don't want to speak for them. I've never had an opportunity to be in front of the county commission, so this will be interesting. But I did feel very strong that this was supported because this is an area in our community that has been underserved for a very long time. We always drive by it. We don't like the way that it looks. The proposal itself from the developer is strong, concrete, and it meets a lot of our demands and the vision on our PICA.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh would like to speak to that.
Yeah, so some things just to fill in some holes. There's a lot of strategy that's gone into this that maybe you haven't heard tonight. That one of the things that I ask us to meet with the county, because the county is the one roadblock to moving this forward. So I asked that we have a strategy meeting with them. It went really well. They asked us to, it went so well that they asked us to come and present to their caucus on June 14th, and that's been set up, so we're going to meet with them. And then the next strategy point was in this to set up the meeting that I arranged in Mount Pleasant, and that was what we went up to today. So there's been some strategy points behind this to line this up in case the board were to want to move forward with this. There's some other things in motion that are going on with this in conjunction, but I would county controller administrator, Greg Todd, who, by the way, is just a great leader for Ingham County, and our 2 county commissioners. We are going to 4 county commissioners, but the 2 that we have currently were all very positive about it. In fact, one posted some social media stuff on it today. So I think we're in a good stead with the county. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Director Clark and Manager Walsh, for bringing this to us. I spoke with Supervisor a little bit prior to the meeting as well. I think I read this and I think I know this, but I just want to clarify that this type of development will be mixed use, correct?
Correct.
So it'll be consistent with what the other development that's happening in Hazlitt Village Square?
Yes.
Like similar, but with
Yes.
different.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want to segue you too far into the concept plan.
Okay.
But yes, they have spoken with the developers of Pine Village / American Homes Meridian. One of the proposed buildings meets the same elevation height.
Okay.
They are very closely working to make it look like a seamless area. If all comes to fruition, we might have an area in the community where someone could age in place.
Perfect. Thank you.
Others? Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. One other point that I should have brought out is that when they came to us, the request was really for the redevelopment fund. Okay, that was the first request. And their request, with the Village Oakland's request, was more than we even actually had in the redevelopment fund. That's when this whole concept came up. It wasn't our concept, it was them. They brought this to us and it sounded interesting, and that's when I invited Supervisor Jackson to attend the meeting to hear about this. So this is how it kind of played out. It was the redevelopment fund, public money, and then shifting over to this financing mechanism. And I've been, I have to say, I've been doing this for a fair number of years with Renaissance zones and brownfields and all this kind of tax incentives and TIFs and all that. I've never come across this. So it's a very interesting concept.
Trustee Deschamps, Treasurer Deschamps.
Thank you. In terms of some history, you're right. The Township Board has seen this as an underdeveloped area that has been, if you will, a well-maintained blight for 10 years and more. And 3 years ago, former Economic Director Buck brought in some focus groups there that met in that old plaza. And then a consulting firm, Braunfels out of Troy, was hired to do an assessment, a market assessment of what would be best put there. The response they got from the focus group was, we want a grocery store back. We really want a grocery store, and let's get a grocery store here. The consultant came back and said there's no market support for a grocery store. That ship had sailed. They've got grocery to the south, and plenty to the south, and even to the north with Monticello's. What they did identify in that report was a need for housing. A lot of need for housing in that part of Hazlitt. And so this, I'm excited about this proposal, is it's what the consultants, what the experts say we need right now in Hazlitt. And Hazlitt Schools certainly needs the additional students to maintain their numbers. With some of the new development in Georgetown, for example, kind of ironic, you can almost throw a stone from Georgetown to Hazlitt High School, but those Georgetown students are actually going to Okemos High School. So even though there seems to be a lot of development on the north side of the township, it's not really, and most of it is not benefiting Hazlitt schools. This development will.
Correct.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? I have a couple of things to say. One is we need to kind of slow down and separate the proposed project from what we're being asked to consider tonight, which is doing what we can do to consider establishing a commercial rehabilitation district to facilitate or support the development of this project that's being proposed. So what we have to do at this point is indicate whether or not we are interested in doing our due diligence in establishing the district and set a June 7th date for the public hearing on that action.
Correct.
That's, okay, and that also goes back to the timeline and the strategy that Mr. Walsh has talked about. And so the question before us tonight is, are we interested in, based on what we've heard, on doing what needs to be done to establish this kind of tool in our township and in that location? Okay, and if so, can we set a date? So everybody's shaking their head, so I'm going to move on and assume that is true. And based on the needs of this project as it's going through, we need to set a date for the public hearing on that concept. And the suggestion that's being offered by planning is June the 7th. I think I'll need I need to suspend my rules and have a motion to that effect, so we can do that immediately. Mr. DeShane.
I move that we suspend our rules and take action on this tonight to set the public meeting.
Supported by Trustee Wilson. All in favor? Nope.
No, that's a roll call.
That's a roll call. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Zach.
Mr. Eckford over there.
May we have a roll call vote? No, is there any other comment or discussion before we go to that?
I'm sorry, Supervisor, this is the motion to suspend our rules
To suspend
only.
our rules, that's
Okay.
right. Mr. Lemaster?
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Trustee
Madam
Wilson.
Supervisor, we have in our packet, we had a motion to approve the creation of, this is on page falling down. It's page 131.
131.
At the top.
Township Board motion to approve the creation of the district and set the
public hearing. So two activities.
Wouldn't the proper motion be just to set the public hearing tonight?
You can set the public hearing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, for June 7th.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the way we're going.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we have suspended our rules. Now I'm open to a motion. Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to set a public hearing date for June 7th, 2022 to receive public comment on the creation of a commercial rehabilitation district at 1655 and 1621 Hazlet Road.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Further comments?
I think this is a terrific idea, and I believe what we'll hear when we hear from the public is that they agree. This is an area that has long been needing rehabilitation, and we know that in part because it's one of our key components of our master plan and our future land use plan. So I'm excited that we're getting interest in this area, and I think that if this is a venue by which we can make that happen, a vessel by which we can make that happen, it's long overdue. So I'm excited to see this when it comes before us at the public hearing, and hopefully we'll hear that the community is as supportive as I am.
Thank you. Trustee Wilson.
I think this is a creative use of our funding rather than going in the direction of Meridian redevelopment funds. So it's exciting this was brought to us. And we're able to take advantage of a public act that we've never taken advantage of before.
Right. Other comments? Mr. Lemaster, do I need a roll call vote?
I don't think you do on this one. No.
Aye. All in favor of the motion to set the public hearing for June 7th for the commercial rehabilitation district proposal, district proposal, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, no. Chair votes yes, motion passes, and we can move on. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 13E, meeting attendance accommodations. Mr. Opselman.
Yes, thank you Supervisor Jackson and board members. So tonight before you is the electronic or virtual meeting accommodation policy and the draft request form. This has been shared with all the members of our boards and commissions for their input. Thus far, we haven't received any substantive input, just an appreciation for the opportunity to weigh in. And so this all stems from Attorney General Dana Nessle's opinion that was issued earlier this year in February, where she was interpreting not only the Open Meetings Act, but also the ADA. And she opined in that opinion that if virtual meeting accommodation is necessary under the ADA to attend the open meeting, then it is allowed, even though the OMA does not allow for virtual participation. So the proposal or the policy before you tonight would allow any of our board and commission members to submit the requested or the request form to our township HR director. She would evaluate the applicant and then grant or deny the accommodation. That accommodation would stay with the board or commission member until they no longer need that accommodation. And it sets forth how the meetings would have to be conducted. Closed session, the accommodated or virtual attending member would be allowed to attend closed session via Zoom or via phone. They would have to declare, just like we did during our virtual meetings under the Open Meetings Act when it was permitted, they would have to denote at the outset of the meeting that they are attending virtually and where they are attending from. So the city, village, or township they are currently in during the meeting. And they would also have to vote by roll call vote. So even if it is a voice vote, they would have to vote by roll call, so there's no confusion on how the virtual member is voting. And then at any meeting where a board or commission member is being accommodated virtually, the public would have equal access to public comment virtually. So if we're having a member attend via Zoom, we would also have 3-minute public comment at all the regular public comment periods for members of the public attending via Zoom. So that is the policy as set forth. Again, it's been shared with all the board and commission members in the township. We do have 2 board and commission members who are interested in applying and receiving the accommodation. And we can bring this back to you on June 7th for a formal adoption. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Trustee Wilson.
I have a question about the public accommodation. Are we going to change our notification or our notices to the public about meetings in order to allow them to do this? Could you explain a bit more about that?
Yep, so if we have a board or commission that is meeting in a hybrid fashion, meaning one of the board or commission members has an accommodation and plans to attend virtually, the meeting agenda and the notice and the web content would all have the Zoom information for the public. So, and that's all set forth in the policy, if you take a look at that. So all of the virtual meeting information would be anywhere that that meeting is actually being promoted, whether it's the official public notice for the meeting, whether it's just the item on our township calendar on the website, or if it's the agenda.
And who would control that Zoom meeting to ensure that you did not have random individuals coming into the meeting and disrupting it?
Yep, Director Geebies or his staff would help facilitate that for directors, depending on the board or commission. And one of our limitations is that only this room really has these capabilities. So we have limitations when we go to Central Fire. Land Preservation Advisory Board does field meetings where they will meet at various pavilions and do walking excursions for their actual board meetings in preserves. So there's certainly some limitations for certain boards and commissions.
Okay, thank you.
Just Treasurer Shane.
Thank you. Clearly, with the AG opinion on this, we need to take action. We're going to need to do this accommodation, and we've got two appointees to our boards and commissions that are interested in attending this way, and so it's important that we follow through. I think we've also got to look at the cost of doing this and a way of taking it off taking the burden off our IT department. You know, we started this meeting talking about IT issues, and part of the burden on IT maintaining a top network is we involve them in doing things like this. It's as if we had our Director of Public Works doing everything from Department of Parks and Recreation, doing everything from direction at the top to coaching teams after hours. And that's the issue with this. These meetings often go late, and they're time-consuming for staff, and I think we're going to need to look at something in the budget for next year that's going to pay for this additional staff time to do this, because it's unfair to expect our IT department, particularly Director Ubis, to be at these meetings that often go late and pull him away from the larger responsibilities we have of making sure this $900,000 we're reinvesting in our IT department is working properly. So it's a consideration. Doesn't mean I'm not going to support this. I fully intend to support it, but it is one of the costs of doing this is that make sure we have staffing to allow for that Zoom accommodation. Perhaps we can find a way to automate it at some point down the road, but right now it's a pretty manual process.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that I was having because the Transportation Commission had been set to meet this Thursday, and I had offered to help facilitate the IT for that if I could just get kind of a trial run course on this podium, which I still have yet to get. So trying to find time in the schedule for that. But I think there's ways that we can flex our time as staff, especially if we have 2 staff members, just due to the agenda items before the body. We can easily accommodate that and take that off the IT department's hands.
As I recall, we do have a new podium coming up and down the pipeline as well sometime this year with the expenses we approved for communications department to improvements to this room and a new podium.
Yeah, with the hopes of making it a little bit more user-friendly.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Trustee Kucinski.
No, I was just asking Manager Walsh if he had comments, if you don't have questions. Sorry.
You should go first.
Yes, you should.
No, I forget. I was just gonna to respond to Treasurer DeShane as well. I think that's very forethought of thinking about that. I did review though the ADA Title II. It's very specific on what is covered. So I would expect, I know we have at least 2 and we may have some more, but I wouldn't expect that we might have many boards and commissions that would require this. So that's all I was going to say. So.
And Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, okay. So just real briefly, I think it's really important. I try really hard to communicate with our board and commission members. And some things, and there's 110 of them, they're the ABC group, by the way, appointed board and commissioners. And I'll send things out to them, and sometimes I'll get a response back, but oftentimes it's just received. But I'll tell you, on this particular issue, I had 7 or 8 board members, appointed board members, responding back. It was really unusual, more than even the road closure. So it's an important topic. And to the point of the treasurer's, I respect his opinion on the staffing thing. But if we go back, we were doing this for 15 nights a month back when we had the whole COVID thing. If this does go forward, and if we do have 2 people at the most, we're talking about 2 evenings a month. And then sometimes we don't have the Transportation Commission, so it'd even be less than that. But we will monitor that closely, and I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Trustee Wilson, did you have?
I did not. I support this.
Mr. Walsh, would you be willing to share the comments that you were getting, or some summary of the flavor of the comments you were getting back from the board and commission members?
Yeah, I didn't expect all the feedback that I received on this. I was just making a note of it to the board and commissioners to let them know that you were, give you a 5-day notice. If you've got thoughts about this, notify your board and let them know. But just a very positive tone from the board and commissioners that we were thoughtful enough and thinking forward and taking care of people who needed this sort of assistance. So it was a very positive response from the board and commission members.
Thank you. Trustee Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'm happy to see this in front of the board and happy to see this implementation. My only comment would be that if there is an accommodation request from someone that auxiliary aids, I'm not sure what sort of auxiliary aids that we have at the township, but people can request it. And that if they do request it, that we have it, and that's built into either the IT budget or the communications budget for whatever modifications are made in the township hall, so that we can have that available when people request it. Also, if somebody, this is probably maybe going beyond the scope, but if somebody has a therapy dog or a seeing eye dog, that we don't have anything that prohibits somebody from being able to bring their animal with them into the township. So those would be the two things that I would recommend as making sure that we're accommodating the public's request for any sort of accommodations or for board or commission members.
Yeah, we do have existing accommodations that are needed for board and commission members, which are being met, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We will see this at our next meeting.
Correct. And I will have this back on for action for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And our final item, 13F, Stimulus Inflationary Payment Program. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson. I know we've been at this for 3 hours tonight, so I'll try to keep this brief. And this is a discussion that we've had part and parcel over the last couple of months. So I know this is not coming to you as a surprise this evening, but one of the things we've tried to do over the last 60 days, Director Tehoff and I, putting together something to deal with the inflation that folks are feeling, whether that's at the gas pump or I think even more importantly at the grocery store. Right now our contracts call for our employment contracts across the board are 2% increases that's what our team has had for 2022. Now that's been adjusted by the board slightly to 3 or 3.5 depending upon whether you have flex time or not. So what's before you this evening is a concept that we would offer a one-time payment to all of our team members. Roughly, it's $158 to $162 depending on the day. I think this morning it was $157 as far as team members, but you can see it'd be a staggered payment, and it's to try to deflect the 8.8% national inflation that we're seeing across the country, and to augment our team members' ability to fight off the inflationary that a lot of people are feeling. And this is a tiered approach. So for those that make the least amount would get the most. So if you make, the recommendation is, if you make less than $49,999, you receive a one-time payment of $3,000. This would not count against any final average contribution for those who are retiring with pension. That still needs to be ironed out with the bargaining groups. When I say ironed out, it just needs to be memorialized. It's not like they're not pushing back against that at all. I don't mean to leave you with that opinion. And those from 50 to 64.99 would $2,700, and then it would tier down to those who earn six figures over 100,000 would receive a $2,000. The only people that would not receive this would be the clerk and the treasurer and myself. We would be excluded from this program. So again, it's about 157 individuals. The payments would go out sometime in June if this is approved. This would be back before you. If it meets with your favor this evening, it'd be back in front of you June 7th. The total cost of the program, if approved by the board, is just short of $400,000. So for some people, it'd be a 2% increase, and for some people, it would be 6.5%, depending upon what your base salary. And so for those individuals who need it the most, those earning less than six figures, they would see roughly, collectively, around 8 or 9% this year, which to meet the inflation, if you take the 2% and the adjustment by the board plus this payment. So we looked at a lot of different avenues to try to, I don't want to say make people whole, because there's nothing here that we have to do. But listening to the board, taking your comments over the last few months about what we can do, this is what we came up with. This does take the place of the retention program that was planned for December. That was $1,000 per person. So everyone in this program is, if it goes forward, is getting their money months ahead of time, and they're getting at least double and sometimes triple what they were going to get before. The other program was a $160,000 program. This is a $400,000 program. So there is quite an adjustment. I'd be happy to answer any questions. It's not rocket scientists, but it's what we came up with to try to meet with the inflationary challenges that people are seeing. So I'd be happy, and I want to thank Director Tehoff for her assistance in putting this together. There's still some work to do, but this is where we're at this evening.
Okay. Board members. Mr. DeShane.
I want to thank the manager and Director Tehoff for bringing this SIP program to us. You're right, there has been a lot of discussion of pay increases by this board the past 6 months. It has been a priority of the board to make sure our employees are paid fairly, and particularly focused on the employees making less than $50,000 a year. And so for them, they will receive, as you say, an 8 to 9%, in some cases more than 9% pay raise between the SIP payment and the 3% payment they're getting. On top of that, we've got new police officers that also got almost an immediate $5,000 a year pay increase. So you have followed our direction in this regard, and you've structured this SIP plan. The earlier increases from 2% to 3 to 3.5%, and then we jumped the pay scale, or eliminated those bottom two levels of our police officer pay scale recently. So we're doing what we can, I think, within reason. We still have a responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure we are protecting the tax base that we get and not spending it recklessly. In this case, I don't think you could argue with that. I think we are more fairly and comprehensively reimbursing or paying our staff for the good work they do. And I think that I support this SIP program, as I did the earlier pay increases, and I'm hopeful that we continue to retain our employees. We haven't had a lot of turnover in our non-police employment, and I think it reflects the fact we offer excellent benefits, and we are now paying our employees more than we were a year ago. And so we're showing them that we do value their work, and we're willing to pay them a fair salary for them, including the SIP bonus plan to help them through this tough year that many of us are experiencing with inflation at 8%. So I appreciate you bringing this to us. It does reflect, I think, the values of this board, and I'll be supporting it in 2 weeks.
Trustee Wilson.
Just a point of clarification, this is a one-time payment, not a pay increase. And that differs from what we did for the police department, where we actually increased the base salaries. So it's a little bit different. I just wanted the public to know that situation. Thank you.
Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson, for pointing that out. I think this is innovative, and I think it is. It does tell our staff that they are appreciated and agreed that it is one time, as opposed to base pay increase. I still support this in the fact that I think Director Tioff and Manager Walsh, you've worked hard to make sure that our lowest paid staff are receiving a bigger benefit. And I think that that's really important, given that, the lower your annual salary, the more difficult it is to, move forward. So I do support this, although I would like to, next year, either reconsider this or maybe look and see how this worked for you, Manager Walsh, and see if there's improvements or something we can do next year.
Thank you. Anyone else? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I have a couple questions for the manager. It says recently the board enhanced increase across the board 3 to 3.5%. Is that, if you could refresh my memory, is that 3 to 3.5% on top of the 2% across all of the contracts or specific contracts? If you could, I'm sorry, if you could just refresh my memory on that.
Sure. For 2022, everyone was supposed to get 2%. And for those that are getting flex time, meaning they're working 7.5 hours a day, they are receiving 3%. The police and fire, who obviously can't take advantage of flex time, and Public Works chose to take the 3.5 and not have flex time. So it's 3% total and 3.5% total.
So this is the 4 open contracts that you're talking about right here, and the non-union.
The increases
3.
I just talked about? No, that's for everyone. That's for everyone regardless. This is separate from the contract negotiations.
Okay.
Yeah, police and fire are getting 3.5, and Public Works is getting 3.5, and everyone else has received 3.
Okay, thank you. And then the $1,000 retention payment that the board approved, it was for, you said this program will be much broader than the $1,000 retention payment. The $1,000 retention payment was for people who worked, I can't remember, I think September of 2021 to December of 2022. Is there any sort of stipulation on length of employment to receive this pay that you mentioned here in the memo?
There's not. It'd be difficult for me to break that down. It's those employees who are employed on June 7th, if this is approved on June 7th, who's
Okay, so
ever
it's
here.
the date of approval by the board. So
That's
if they're here
correct.
at that time, they'll get this.
Yeah, and it's a really good question, and I've given a lot of thought to that. I just couldn't think of a fair way to do it. Plus, I don't want to bring people on new and then not give it to them and create this us versus them. I think it'll help in our retention because this is really not patting anyone on the back on this thing, but this is really innovative, and I think that our team members will see that and it'll help us retain. By the way, it should be noted, and this credit goes to Director Tioff, there's a no vacancy sign out in front of this township. We talk about retention and recruitment, about it's difficult to do, we're at 100% other than the police department. We have no openings in the township. We are fully staffed, and it's been a while since we've been able to say that. So, and that goes to all of her work and Carol Hassey and others who have worked to fill the ranks here. So, and I think this will help augment that.
Okay, and just another final question. So these payments, I know you say manager, clerk, treasurer exempt, so it includes police, it includes everybody but these 3 people.
That is
Includes
correct.
police, fire, DPW, so it doesn't matter whatever contracts, negotiations, or anything like that, everyone gets this.
This is a $400,000 payment that we don't have to do, that's not called for in the contracts. It would be just by the blessing of this board that you would do it, and has nothing to do with contract negotiations that are ongoing or in the past.
And we don't have to take any formal action as a board to replace the $1,000 retention payment that we approved before with this proposal that you have before us tonight.
If you approve this on June 7th, you are doing that because it's clear in the memo that the $165,000 program is going away, and we're going to now have a $400,000 program. So that's included in here. The last step that we have to do administratively is to have the bargaining groups that are defined benefits, because the only effect on final average comp is for a defined benefit plan. And so that would be the police, the fire, public works, and administrative professional. They'll need to sign off that. What we don't want is for someone who might be retiring in the next 3 months is for this to count against their final average comp. So we'll be paying pension on this for the next 20 or 30 years.
Well, finally, I want to thank you and Director Tehoff and whoever else was behind the scenes working on this. Obviously, you all know my stance on pay rates and making sure that we have comparable compensation plans for our employees. While this isn't part of annual increases and salary ranges year after year, and whatever you're working on behind the scenes with contract negotiations and all that, I'm not going to ask you any questions about that. But this definitely helps put food on the table. It definitely helps show appreciation for our team members. And I really appreciate this coming before the board. It's much better than the $1,000 one-time $1,000 retention payment, and it's super innovative. So I'm just really appreciative to see this come before the board.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I know we're running late, so I won't belabor the points too far because a lot has been said already. I will point out that as trustees are governed by LOCC as well, they too are not included in this. So just a point of clarification there. Secondly, I think that putting money in people's pockets right now is what's needed, and that's the short-term benefit that will be remembered from this right now. But I think the long-term benefit is that they know that they have an employer who cares. And that will last a lot longer than the money will, I imagine. And so I commend the manager and his team and Director Tehoff for coming up with this plan. I think the structure is good. I think the intent is good. And I think the result will be good as well. So thank you to the manager and Director Tehoff for their hard work on this. And I look forward to seeing this come before us at our next meeting.
Other comments? And thank you all. We will expect to see this next meeting. We come now to item 14, comments from the public. Are there members of the public? No. Thank you. Then we'll move quickly to item 15, other matters and board member comments. Let me start this off by noting that it was brought to my attention that in 2020, this was actually done, 2020. 2020, this board voted to, by resolution, to proclaim the first Friday of June each year, beginning on June 5, 2020, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Further, the Township Board encourages all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. In 2020, this motion passed 7-0, and I believe we are doing our due diligence by reminding the community that we continue to support this effort. Period.
Should we have a moment of silence for the people of Buffalo?
Would you like to? Okay. Mr. Walsh is suggesting, and probably all of us are thinking, that we should take a moment to consider the kinds of losses we've had all over the country, actually, in the last week, in many cases by gun violence. I thank you. We have come to item 16, which is by an adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have all in favor of the motion to adjourn. Please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Thank you all very much. I didn't talk about this, but Amber mentioned it.